Chapter 28. It was already late at night. After the barbecue party was over, the knight went to the town to rest. Levis and Li Weiwei also entered their respective rooms. The old butler Carter, instead of red wine, took a glass of apple juice and entered the study. "Master, you look very sober now. You're not drunk." "Thank you." He took the glass of apple juice and took a sip. It was fruity and fragrant. The alcohol content of beer could only fill one's stomach. It was very difficult to get drunk. Under the candlelight, Carter's complexion was very unnatural. Liszt discovered this during the day. "Mr. Carter, are you feeling unwell?" "I am fine, master." "If there is a problem, you must say it. Don't force yourself. Although the castle cannot do without the butler at the helm, your health is more important. Take care of yourself." "Thank you." Old Carter was on the verge of tears. "Tomorrow, when the assimilation of the sprite worms is complete, I will follow the convoy to the Coral City. I may leave the Coral Island for a few days so you can take care of the matters in the castle." "Rest assured, master. In fact, there is nothing to worry about. Apart from the few sprite worms, take good care of Dosen and Black Dragon. Also, look after the Black Tulip in my place once a day. In addition, do not stop the construction of the horse farm outside the castle. I hope that after I return, I will be able to settle the alfalfa sprite worms." The mission was always the most important. After a brief chat, they went back to sleep. Just like that, the night passed. The next morning, the 8 tulip sprite worms completed the assimilation of the black tulip, and the convoy immediately set off. Liszt rode Fiery Dragon, accompanied by Marcus and Thomas. The castle was entrusted to Carter and the town to Gort, as well as his 4 retainer knight. "Teacher Gort, when I return, I need to see the patrol team from the Thorns Ridge to the east coast." "As you wish, I will train them well," Gort said lightly. "Then I will set off." I will bring a few bottles of gin on the return trip." "Wow, this is great." On the back of Fiery Dragon, Liszt turned his head back. At the entrance of the castle, Butler Carter and a group of servants quietly watched him leave. He no longer hesitated and lightly kicked the horse's belly. The flaming dragon horse immediately rushed out and followed the carriages. He was a little excited. His predecessor was very familiar with the Coral Island. However, strictly speaking, it was his first time leaving the flower town to experience the outside world. It was a magical medieval land and a noble system under the rule of a knight. After leaving the Thorns Ridge, the majority of the lands he set foot on belonged to the Count. Only some small towns belonged to the counts in Feft Baron. There were also some smaller villages and settlements that were the fiefdoms of the Lord Knight. In the entire Coral Island, there was only one Enfeft Viscount. He was the Count's follower, Jonas Gravel. However, there was still a small island outside of the Coral Island. It belonged to another Viscount follower, Trick Wildgrass. On the Coral Island, there were a total of 6 cities, 1 large and 5 small. The Coral City at the foot of the Tulip Castle was the largest city. The North Valley City, White Birch City, Elm City, and Snakespear City were all owned by the Count. The Gravel Castle and its subsidiary Gravel City were all owned by Viscount Eunice. From the Flower Town to the Coral City, one had to pass through the North Valley City and the Baihua City. However, the carriages did not stop at the 2 small cities. They only ate a simple meal in the castle's courtyard in the North Valley City before heading straight for the Coral City. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the horses' hooves stepped into a sea of flowers, the Coral City had arrived. The flowers were all kinds of tulip. Most of them were magic ingredients, while a few were ornamental flowers, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, the tulip family's famous tulip. The sea of flowers followed the hillside. To the left of the main road was the towering city wall of the Coral City. The city faced the sea and had a busy dock. Liszt gazed into the distance and could still see the advanced 2-masted sailing ships docked at the dock. The world had slowly transitioned from the era of oars to the era of sails. It was by relying on sailing ships that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's first conquerors came to the archipelago from the mainland and established the archipelago state. Only sailing ships could traverse the sea. Unfortunately, sails are probably the end of ships. There isn't enough steel to give birth to the era of ironclads and even the era of steamships. List sighed inwardly. He withdrew his gaze from the distance and turned to the right of the main road. On the right was a mountain range. On the side of the mountain range facing the sea was a steep cliff, while on the other side was a gentle slope. The Tulip Castle was built on the cliff. A wide road paved with gravel wound from the castle's gate to the coral city at the foot of the mountain. The tall castle, like a flag, stood at the highest point of the coral island. The pointed tower pierced the blue sky. The thick rocks and the mountain range were connected. Surrounded by flowers, it was solemn and dignified, showing the majestic grandeur of the fortress. 10 years. According to List's memory, when the family came to the coral island, it took only 10 years to build such a tall and sturdy tulip castle. During this period, hundreds of serfs were even exhausted to death. Even today, the castle was still sporadically expanding. The glory of the aristocracy had always been built on blood. It was just the Count's castle. It was said that the Sapphire Grand Duke's castle had been built for 100 years. The corpses of serfs under the castle cliff were piled up tens of meters deep. It looks pale gray, but it is actually blood red. Rather than living here, I prefer the small castle in the flower town. At least I can live at ease. List's heart was heavy. Following his brother and sister, he walked towards the familiar yet unfamiliar castle. On the way, they met a group of knights coming out of the castle. The knight in the lead saluted Levis respectfully. "Young Master Levis, your trip was smooth." "Your trip was smooth, Captain Mickey." Levis bowed and returned the salute. Captain Mickey saluted Li Weiwei. "Miss Li Weiwei, your trip was smooth." "Your trip was smooth, Captain Mickey." At this time, Captain Mickey looked at List and, in the same impeccable manner, "Young Master List, welcome home." "Long time no see, Captain Mickey." List bowed. The knight in front of him was the captain of the knights stationed at the Tulip Castle, responsible for the security of the Tulip Castle. Mickey was a baron. His fief was managed by his family, while he held a position in the Tulip Castle. Led by the knight team, after a while, they arrived at the castle's gate. The butler, Louis, stood at the gate and welcomed the three siblings. His aged face was brimming with a warm smile. Oh, the happiest thing is always to see master's children return to the castle like tired birds returning to their nests. Grandpa Louis, long time no see. Your body is still so strong. List handed Firedragon's reins to a servant and greeted Louis. Louis was at least 60 years old. He had followed List's grandfather as a valet. Chapter 29. I haven't seen you for 2 months. Young Master List looks more spirited than before. How is life in Flower Town? Asked Louis with a smile. Everything is fine. That's good. The Lord has also talked about you several times. He is also very concerned about your current life. Would the Earl of Coral Island talk about List's life? List felt very doubtful. If the Earl really cared about List, he would not enfe List to a dilapidated town like Flower Town. Back home, List did not feel homesick. The soul in his body came from another distant world. The memories of his predecessor were just a movie and could not affect his current mood. He and the Tulip family did not have a familial relationship. Everything was more like a game, substituting himself in the role of List. The busy servants in the castle bowed to the three young masters and young ladies when they saw them. The Tulip family members living here were only the Earl, the Countess, Levis, Lytton, and Li Weiwei, who often came back to live. However, there were more than 200 servants. Moreover, the servants had little free time. They were busy from morning to night. The real work could be summed up in one: to maintain the aristocracy's luxurious life. I'm going to take a bath. I can't stand the smell. Li Weiwei entered the castle and turned to leave. If father asks about me, tell him that I will be there in a moment. Levis seemed to be the owner of the castle. List, do you also need to take a bath first? Father has been keeping your room for you, including the clothes you didn't take away. There are servants to take care of them. I'm not a germaphobe. I will wait for father here. Brother, if you have something to do, just go ahead and do it. I don't need to entertain you. Well, the castle is also your home. Well, I have to go talk to Teacher Frank about the black tulip. He is helping me with the planting, sales, and pharmaceuticals. Also, the elves need to be settled down. These delicate little creatures can't be neglected in the slightest. Levis also left. Marcus followed a male servant to settle the horses, leaving only List and a few male servants in the living room. He clasped his hands behind his back and admired the crystal lamps on the stone pillars. The number of crystals and other gems in the castle represented the wealth of the nobles, because most of the gems came from dragons. In List's hometown, gems were probably used to look good. In this place, gems were natural magic attachments and contained magical power. Gems were indispensable for making magic items. The crystal lamp on the stone pillar in front of him was a magic item made of low-quality crystals. It could be lit until the magic power in the crystal was exhausted. Then, the magic power could be replenished by a magician or a knight. This cycle continued until the crystal was worn out and became an ordinary stone. Is a crystal lamp without any engravings worth admiring for so long? Following the sound of boots hitting the ground, someone spoke from behind List. List turned around. On the stairs leading to the second floor in the castle's living room, he saw the master of the Tulip Castle. He was a middle-aged man with light blonde hair and a pair of unattractive gray-green eyes, which were completely different from the sapphire-colored eyes of List and his two siblings. His ordinary face had nothing special about it. Lee William Tulip would probably be inconspicuous in the crowd. However, he was the master of the Coral Island, the Sky Knight who had obtained the title of Count through his own efforts. Levis and Li Weiwei were more like their father than their mother, therefore, they were not good-looking. Only their sapphire-colored eyes were inherited from their mother. List, on the other hand, inherited his mother's appearance, which was excessively handsome. It is probably because I am used to lighting candles that I am not used to the light of the crystal lamp. What are you complaining about life in the flower town? Lee Williams stood on the stairs, not continuing to go down. I am very satisfied with life in the flower town, Sir Father. List bowed and saluted. Your body is as strong as ever. Your surging chi is about to overflow. Your chi has also increased. This is very good. It is also good to be content with a poor life and not complain. Lee William nodded. Where are your brother and sister? They are busy, they will come in a moment. Follow me to the study. Lee William turned around and went upstairs. List followed him upstairs and entered the Count's study. The study was very large, with a wall of bookshelves, with many books made of thick bast paper. All of them had been sprayed with deodorant and fragrance, so that they did not have the unique stench of thick bast paper. Opposite the bookshelves, near the window, was a mahogany desk with many books piled up on it. Clatter! The Count unscrewed a bottle of Old Crescent wine and poured it into 2 crystal goblets. The amber-red wine swayed in the goblets like blood, sparkling and translucent. The Count picked up the goblet and handed it to his third son. He seemed to be a bit surprised. It seems that living independently for 2 months has sharpened your temperament. In the past, List was very restrained in front of him. The relationship between father and son was awkward. But now List looked very calm. Thank you. List took the wine. I understand the responsibilities of a lord. I need to make changes. Positive changes. I think so too. After exchanging a few words, the father and son discovered that there was not much to talk about family. Thereupon, the Count raised his goblet, drank a mouthful of red wine, and stiffly changed the subject. Has the matter of the black tulip been properly handled? How much did Levis pay you? Tulip Castle is responsible for the cultivation and sales. I have a share of the profits for 10 years, 30%, which is only a cooperation between me, Levis, and Li Weiwei. The Count pondered for a moment. Only a cooperation between the 3 of you? Yes. You shouldn't have left Lytton. He is also your younger brother. He is still young. Isn't it good to be sheltered under his father's wings? My brother and sister, we are all adults. It is natural for us to cooperate. List smiled and did not deliberately explain or clarify his thoughts. Lytton looked down on him, so how could he look down on Lytton? As if only now remembering, List asked, What about Madame and Lytton? I didn't see them. Madame took Lytton to Snake Spear City. Today is Lytton's uncle's birthday. The Countess came from a baron family of Coral Island, which was located in a small town near Snake Spear City. After that, there was another period of silence. Liszt did not inherit the father-son relationship with the Count, and he could not chat like a stranger. It was difficult to grasp the degree between them, so he simply spoke less. The Count was somewhat unaccustomed to Liszt's current temperament. Compared to the yes-man attitude of before, it was more like a conversation between equals, and he could not find the feeling of being reprimanded. After a while, he said, "It's still early for dinner. You can take a stroll around, or go to Coral City to see your friends." "No, I want to stay in the study and read." Chapter 30. History doesn't exist. Only some night novels can be used to speculate on the local customs and social development of the past. This was Liszt's understanding of this. He also didn't know the origin of humans in this world. What was certain was that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had been founded for 150 years. Last year, a grand anniversary celebration was held, which left an impression on Liszt. There were many novels about the Knight of the Sapphire family in China. Some novels recorded that the Sapphire family had a heritage of 1,000 years. As for the Tulip family, there was no such thing as a genealogy. What Liszt knew was his great-great-grandfather, the father of his grandfather's grandfather. At that time, the family didn't have a greater tulip sprite, nor a lesser tulip sprite. Therefore, there was no tulip surname. Their original surname was Tile, indicating that their family was originally of the common class. According to the family history passed down from father to son, the great-great-grandfather was born with divine strength. He followed an aristocrat and served the newly founded Sapphire family. He made meritorious service in the war and was conferred the title of Lord Knight. Since then, the family had risen to the ranks of the aristocracy. The great-great-grandfather's generation became a baron, the great-great-grandfather's generation became a viscount, and the great-great-grandfather's generation obtained a tulip sprite. After Lee William inherited the title, the sprite evolved into a greater sprite, and the family's surname was changed to Tulip. A few years later, Lee William became a Sky Knight. Because of his outstanding military service, he was conferred the title of Earl of Coral Island by the Sapphire Grand Duke. In order to show that the family had risen to the ranks of the upper aristocracy, the serpentine Lee in Lee William's name became the beginning of the name of the descendants. Each descendant would be called Lee XX or Lee X, or Lee XXX, Lee XXXX. As for how many XS they could have, it depended on the mood of the celebrity. According to Liszt's understanding, the word Lee was probably equivalent to the word Sure outside of the surname. Therefore, the Tulip family only had a history of 6 generations, spanning a time of about 150 years. If one went further up, they would not know who their ancestors were. First ancestor, distant ancestor, founding 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 ancestor. In his hometown, his family's genealogy could be traced back to the Ming dynasty. As for their bloodline, it could be traced all the way back to the era of the Yellow Emperor. Also, these night novels that boast about the Sapphire family are all nonsense. The family's 1,000-year inheritance has all kinds of strange origins. Some say that they originated from the southern part of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. Some say that they migrated from the Blast Furnace Kingdom. And some say that they drifted here from the distant Blue Dragon Empire. If the Sapphire family is boasting behind these novels, then they are too careless. He wanted to sort out the general history of this world, but he felt that there was no hope. Among the night novels that he had read, the farthest recorded history was a novel called The Dull Night and the Red-Tailed Fire Dragon. The story of this novel took place in the unsetting Radiance Empire 10,000 years ago. However, List had verified that the unsetting Radiance Empire was founded no more than 3,000 years ago. The unsetting Radiance Empire was also the country with the longest reign on the continent. Many countries were established with the friendship of dragons, but they would decline because of the death or departure of the dragon. Even the destruction of the country was normal due to the dragon-slaying war. At the beginning of the founding of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, a dragon-slaying war took place. At that time, the Sapphire Dragon was almost killed by the invaders of the Eagle Kingdom and was unable to establish a foothold on the vast continent. During the escape, the dragon's blood dyed a mountain range blue. Countless sapphires were produced in the mountain range, and it became an important mineral mountain range of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, Blue Blood Mountain. Although the dragon did not die, the Sapphire Grand Duke I was seriously injured and had to withdraw from the continent, fleeing to the distant island to establish a country. Of course, this part of history was inferred by List. In the night novel that praised the Sapphire family, the origin of Blue Blood Mountain was that the Sapphire Dragon had bitten the hostile White Iron Dragon of the Eagle Kingdom, and its blood dyed the mountain range. As for why the blood of the White Iron Dragon would create a mountain range that could be mined for sapphires, different people have different opinions. It was enough to fool ordinary people. There was no need to explain it so clearly. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Please come in. List raised his head from a book called Guide to the Development of Fire-Attributed Chi. The one who came in was the castle's deputy butler, Silva, who was in his early 40s. He was Louis's deputy and the appointed successor of the family's butler. Young Master List, your grandmother, Madame Penelope, has arrived. She is in the reception room, accompanied by young Master Levis and Miss Li Weiwei. Is grandmother here? I'll go over. List rubbed his forehead, feeling a little annoyed. His grandmother did not like him. His father's disgust was more of his disappointment in him. Now that he had returned, his temperament had changed, and the Count no longer showed disgust. Obviously, he was happy with this change. But his grandmother was different. She did not like List because List reminded her of Melissa, her daughter-in-law. Penelope lived in a small castle in Coral City, and the reason why she did not live with her son was because of Melissa. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law did not get along. List, who was very much like his mother, became Penelope's punching bag. But no matter how annoyed he was, he still had to go downstairs to greet her. Grandmother, you have come. I am very relieved to see you in good health. Oh, look, who is here? The wrinkles on Penelope's face were already very thick. She was almost 60 years old. List, if you didn't speak, I would have thought that Melissa had come to oppose me again. That beautiful face. Thank God. She has already gone to heaven to enjoy her life. Only then would an old woman like me dare to visit my son's castle. Without any expression on his face, List sat down quietly without saying a word. The old lady did not like him, so why should he invite a snub? Anyway, they did not meet often, so it was fine to just treat them as strangers and maintain a superficial respect. Li Weiwei smiled and said, List, when grandmother heard that you were back, she immediately rushed to the castle. Usually, at this time, she would pray for the family for a few hours. Penelope turned her head away from List and whispered, I did not come here just to see him. Was this what it meant to be dishonorable? List thought that Madame Penelope probably doted on her grandson. It was just that she habitually attacked List, who looked like Melissa. It was a habit of more than 10 years. In fact, whether it was love or dislike, it did not matter. List just wanted to be a quiet, handsome man. According to your sister, the flower town looks more simple and crude than I imagined, just like a small village? Madame Penelope asked. It is indeed a bit simple and crude, but it is more suitable for development. I already have a plan to develop the flower town. Look, this majestic tone is a bit like our tulip family. Don't always imitate Melissa, who is neither impatient nor impatient, as if she was born to be superior to others. They already look alike enough, but if their temperaments are similar, it would really kill this old woman. It would be like a haze that I cannot shake off. List did not respond. He did not have much of an impression of his mother, who died of illness when he was very young. Chapter 31. The past between Melissa and Madame Penelope was already an old story in the castle. Madame Penelope scolded Melissa, thinking that Melissa could not tolerate her. With the Marquis backing her, she could not afford to offend him and could only move out of Tulip Castle. List, however, felt that Madame Penelope was too mean. More than 10 years had passed, yet she was still complaining endlessly. Moreover, in the past 10 years, Melissa had passed away, and Madame Penelope was still unable to move in because she was at odds with the new countess and her daughter-in-law. You are lucky to have come back today. The Baron's daughter is not in the castle. Otherwise, I would have been the first to turn around and leave. That woman has a smell that makes me uncomfortable, and your father cannot tolerate her. Now, the entire castle is filled with her smell, and I feel uncomfortable even if I stay here for a moment. Li Weiwei, who was sitting next to Madame Penelope, wrapped her arms around her, changed from her usual domineering manner, and said in a coquettish tone, "Grandmother, if you don't like Tulip Castle, you can come to my Falcon Town. I have a very beautiful manor and a hot spring there. You will definitely like it. My little girl, as a noble lady, you must sit properly. Look at you, you are already 19 years old this year, yet you still haven't found a satisfactory other half. You are not a lady enough. Grandmother is right, Li Weiwei, you have to learn to be a lady, and not ride horses and carry guns like us." Levis teased, then said to Madame Penelope, "Grandmother, if you think the castle smells bad, I can put more fragrance in it. This is not something that can be solved by fragrance. Having two women enter the house one after another has already exhausted me. I don't want to come to the castle if it is not necessary." Saying that, Madame Penelope turned her head and said to the butler, Louis, who was standing to the side, "Louis, you will help me pass on these words to the Baron's daughter, right?" It was very provocative. Louis smiled gently. "Madam, you know that I prefer to keep my mouth shut." Boring Louis. From young to old, you are always so boring. Ever since Madame Penelope entered the castle, the entire conversation revolved around her. Of course, 80% of the conversation was done by her. Liszt just smiled awkwardly but politely. It was not until the Count returned from outside and announced that the banquet was ready to begin that Liszt was freed from this awkward atmosphere. The banquet in Tulip Castle was obviously not comparable to the banquet in Flower Town's small castle. Just the number of people was incomparable. At tonight's banquet, almost all the nobles in the castle were seated, including the Count's family, his tutor, the knight captain, and a few of the Count's followers who were guests in the castle. There were a total of 16 nobles, including Lord, Knight, Baron, Viscount, and Count. At the banquet, with Madame Penelope around, there was naturally no awkward silence. They kept chatting at all times. Liszt concentrated on enjoying the food. Although he had never gotten used to the Western-style cuisine, but compared to the coarse food in Flower Town, the food here could be called delicious. He did not participate in the conversation much, and few people came to talk to him. Just like in the memory of his predecessor, he became invisible in the castle. However, before he wanted to interrupt, but he could not. Now he did not want to interrupt. After all, he was just a transmigrator who had reincarnated in a corpse. He could not integrate himself into the Tulip family. He could only look at it calmly like a bystander, keep a low profile, do things in line with the times, and then immerse himself in development. Perhaps one day, there would be no need to keep a low profile, and he could do as he pleased. The day after the banquet, Liszt got up early because the three siblings had to go with the fleet to Red Crab Island to visit their sick grandfather, Marquis Merlin Longtaro. Send my sincere regards. The Count also got up early and enjoyed breakfast with his three children. As a son-in-law, he should have visited in person. However, his current identity was that of an ex-son-in-law, and his relationship with the Taro family was estranged. As such, it was inconvenient for him to visit. Madame Penelope had already returned from her stroll. She said in a bleak tone, "Levis, Li Weiwei, Liszt, Send my regards to Marquis Merlin. In my memory, he was a handsome aristocrat with a strong and outstanding physique. I did not expect that after a few years, he would become so ill that he could not work, and even lose his position as the captain of the court fleet. Birth, aging, illness, and death are the rules of heaven and earth. Mother, you do not have to worry about it. Are you trying to tell me that I am also a damned old woman? Why do you think so? I am looking forward to you living for more than 100 years. From the 2 women you married, it can be seen that you have been looking forward to my death for a long time, so that you can be at peace. No one will disturb you from doing anything on the Coral Island. The Count could only smile awkwardly and politely. Liszt, together with Marcus, was followed by a castle serving man, who was responsible for carrying his luggage. After saying goodbye, the 3 siblings went to the wharf together. The wharf was part of the Coral City. Although it was called a city, Liszt was more willing to call it a large toilet. The streets and alleys were filled with the sour smell of fermented feces. Because of this, the tulip family produced a kind of tulip with a strong fragrance, which was widely popular among the citizens. Tulip flowers would be pinned on their chests to dilute the disgusting smell on the streets, putting aside the smell of feces. A large city like the Coral City was not as majestic as a small county in Liszt's hometown. There were no tall buildings or mansions, only scattered wooden houses next to stone houses, spreading into the distance along the streets of varying width. There were all kinds of shops along the streets, and pedestrians in a hurry would inevitably step on all kinds of feces. The citizens always liked to dump their feces on the road. If it was a pile of dog shit, one could certainly choose to avoid it. But if it was a street full of dog shit, then the correct way was to step on it with a frown. As a result, layer upon layer of feces, after constant trampling, merged with the road surface, creating the city's unique feces road, which naturally carried a stench. Why was hygiene so poor? Because the civilians were busy with their livelihood and simply did not care about hygiene. The aristocrats lived in castles on the edge of the city and did not care about the dirtiness of the city. The only good thing was that the Coral City was just an island city with a limited population. The scale of the feces and urine produced was still tolerable under the constant weathering of nature. If it was a larger city, then perhaps the feces and urine could submerge the city. Could it be that the ability of the elves has limited my horizons and I can't think of using feces for farming? As Liszt looked at the Coral City, his imagination went wild. Maybe I can collect the feces on the island and take them all to the flower town. In the town? No. In the outskirts of the town, build a few methane ponds. He understood the principle of methane ponds, but it was a bit difficult to use methane for lighting and cooking. After simple fermentation, using it to fertilize the fields was the fastest way. The barren soil of the flower town was comparable to yellow soil, and it was really in urgent need of fertilizer. Chapter 32. The city was not worth looking forward to. Only the castle was worth looking forward to. Aristocrats still paid attention to hygiene. There were bathrooms, toilets, and servants to transport excrement and garbage out of the castle. Because no one knew how to use excrement to fertilize the fields, they were randomly discarded in the wild and naturally weathered. The effective use of excrement to fertilize the fields could definitely reduce the dependence on the elves, only reduce. Because the elves also had the ability to improve the characteristics of crops. The brig sailed on the blue sea. The Coral City had gradually disappeared from sight, and the towering tulip castle on the top of the mountain had also begun to fall from the sea level. This seemed to prove that this world was also a sphere. Liszt occasionally thought about the world he had transmigrated into. What was the situation like in the end? But there was no information to infer any conclusions. Sir, what are you looking at? Marcus came over. Looking at the sea, the blue sea, where countless treasures are hidden. I grew up by the sea, so I don't have such beautiful reveries about the sea. There are sea monsters in the sea, maybe some fish, but there are also fish in the rivers and lakes, which are not dangerous. The wealth of the continent is truly rich and inexhaustible. The glory of the knight and the aristocracy is also contested on the continent. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was an archipelago, but it never gave up the conquest of the continent. Every few years, it would organize orders of chivalry to go to the continent to compete for minerals. It created a group of aristocrats. The Tulip family also made their fortune here. Marcus often dreamed of going to the continent to fight in the war and being conferred the title of Lord Knight. Now that he was determined to serve Liszt, he would naturally bewitch Liszt from time to time. Liszt was still looking at the deep sea, not caring about the wealth of the continent. The battlefield was so dangerous. Why would he go? It would be better to be a quiet country lord, do some tasks, farm, and take one step at a time steadily and surely. If it was just a simple transmigration, he didn't think he could stand out among the Aborigines, but with the help of the Smoke Mission, becoming strong was just around the corner. As for what the Smoke Mission was, one day its secrets would be unraveled. Teacher Marcus, I heard that outside of the archipelago of the Grand Duchy, there are still large unexplored islands? Yes, I've talked to some old sailors. There are still a lot of islands outside the archipelago, but those islands are deep in the sea and often have storms. There are also a lot of submerged reefs. It's difficult for ships to come and go, so there's no development value. Maybe. Liszt could not deny it. Putting everything else aside, as long as the distant fishing industry was developed, the wealth of the sea would be unveiled. At that time, the competition for islands would be no less than the competition for land. He couldn't do it now. He was just the lord of a small town in the countryside, so he had to focus on development first. Raise the sails. Sail forward. Raise the sails. Sail forward. The angry roars of the crew could be heard from below the mast. At this time, the south wind was blowing from the stern of the ship, making a flapping sound. The captain decisively ordered the sailors to raise the sails to get more wind. The emergence of sailboats allowed humans to enter larger seas. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's fleet was mostly sailboats, but they all had horizontal sails. There were no schooners. The advantage of horizontal sails was that they were fast when the wind was with them, but the disadvantage was that they had almost no effect when the wind was against them. They needed to row. At this time, the wind was with them. The fleet raised their sails, forming a triangular formation on the sea. It was a spectacular sight. They set off in the morning and arrived at Red Crab Island in the evening. Red Crab Island was 10 times the size of Coral Island. Long Taro Castle was not on the coast, but halfway up the mountain range in the middle of the island. Therefore, after getting off the ship, Liszt and the others had to stay in the dock city of Sea Crab City for one night and then change to carriages. After traveling for one day, they would arrive at Long Taro Castle on the third day. Pigeons had not yet been trained to send and receive letters, and the weight of thick bast paper was estimated to be too heavy for pigeons to carry. However, because a night had been arranged to deliver a letter, saying that the Tulip family would come to visit in the near future. Therefore, Long Taro Castle had arranged for servants to wait in the Sea Crab City's courtyard. After receiving Liszt and his party, they were immediately arranged to stay in the courtyard. They did not have to stay in the dirty city. After dinner at night, Liszt took a bath and lay in bed. He was a little seasick. In his hometown, he was used to taking planes and trains, but he was really not used to taking a boat. Fortunately, his predecessor was an islander, and his swimming ability was not bad, so he was able to slightly overcome it and not completely get seasick. As an islander, you are actually seasick. Liszt, I have to say that you are losing the face of the Tulip family. I thought you had matured, but I didn't expect you to be so unbearable. Thinking of your previous cowardly behavior, it really is my stupid younger brother. Li Weiwei appeared in Liszt's room at some point. She did not knock on the door. This surprised Liszt because he was observing his smoke serpentines. He often took them out to see if there were any new discoveries. But he soon settled down, because Li Weiwei did not seem to be able to see the smoke serpentines. Only Liszt could see them, so he did not have to worry about leaks. You forgot to knock on the door. I didn't knock, but it doesn't matter. Li Weiwei crossed her arms over her chest and stared at Liszt, expressing her disdain. It is very important to me. You did not respect my privacy, and in doing so, it is very unladylike. Aristocrats like ladylike ladies, dear sister. I don't need to change myself to please any aristocrat. Besides, List, when did I need you to give me advice? If we weren't on Red Crab Island, I would really teach you a lesson and let you understand that advancing to Earth Knight is nothing. List had been bullied by Li Weiwei since childhood. He believed that the root cause was that Li Weiwei was jealous of his appearance, handsome enough to make most women feel ashamed. You didn't come here just to tell me that I am still very weak, did you? I just wanted to see your ugly appearance when you get seasick. Since you have seen it, can you please go back? Li Weiwei fiercely glared at him, turned around, and walked away. List got up and locked the door. The other party was 19 years old, and she was still a girl. Her behavior was really unfathomable. List didn't care much. In his memory, Li Weiwei was such a careless, or rather rash and frivolous person. The Count often lamented that he and Li Weiwei should change their temperaments. One was more graceful than a girl, and the other was more active than a boy. Lying down again, List could not sleep and could only think about some boring things. 5 months ago, I came to Longtaro Castle as a New Year's Day visit. At that time, Marquis Merlin was not on the island and was still serving as the captain of the court fleet. I have not formally met him for about 4 or 5 years. Due to the aristocratic monogamy system, families were often not that prosperous. Marquis Merlin had 1 son and 2 daughters. The third daughter, Melissa, had already passed away, while the second daughter, Melinda, was married to the Marquis follower, Viscount Roland Pinecone of Long Surround Island. There was only one heir, the eldest son, Mesiro Longtaro, and Mesiro also had only one son, Meopal Longtaro. Cousin Meopal seems to be almost 25 years old and still unmarried. It seems he is pursuing Sapphire Grand Duke's daughter. I heard that this princess of a small country is a social butterfly. Grand duchies were vassals of empires and kingdoms. The highest ruler was a Grand Duke. Strictly speaking, if one was not a king, one's daughter could not be called a princess. Moreover, the newly enthroned Sapphire Grand Duke, because he could not become a dragon knight, his title had already been demoted to Duke. In the aristocratic system, Prince, Grand Duke, and Duke were of the same level. However, only by becoming a knight could one be conferred the title of Prince or Grand Duke. Otherwise, one could only be conferred the title of Duke. However, rules were dead while people were alive. Within the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, all the aristocrats addressed the ruler as Grand Duke. His daughter was naturally treated as a princess and sought after by people. Chapter 33. The jolting of the carriage made List drowsy. From Sea Crab City, they bumped their way to Redstone City. After spending the night in Redstone City, they waited until dawn. After a 2-hour drive, they finally saw the Longtaro Castle standing halfway up the mountain. The Longtaro Castle was almost 4 times the size of Tulip Castle. It had an arrow tower that was 100 or 200 meters tall. Because it was located halfway up the mountain, the castle was almost integrated with the mountain range. List had visited Neuschwanstein Castle in Europe when he was on his hometown Earth. The majesty of Neuschwanstein Castle was similar to that of Tulip Castle, except that it did not have the steep terrain of Tulip Castle, which was backed by a cliff. But compared to the Longtaro Castle in front of them, Neuschwanstein Castle appeared small. Just the Longtaro Castle alone had an imposing manor comparable to the White City in The Lord of the Rings. Below the castle was a city. The carriage did not need to pass through the city. It directly followed a slightly steep mountain road towards the castle. Halfway through the journey, the night squad of the Longtaro Castle discovered and welcomed them. Learning that they were relatives of the Tulip family, the night squad immediately escorted the carriage to the castle. The night squad rushed up the mountain to notify them in advance. Therefore, when the carriage arrived at the castle gate, the heir of the Longtaro Castle, the cousin of the 3 siblings, Meopal Longtaro, was already waiting with the servants. Levis, Li Weiwei, List. Meopal was a talented man with an elegant demeanor. His sapphire-like eyes were particularly beautiful. I received the letter and knew that you were coming. I have been waiting for a long time. Did everything go well on the road? List had to admit. This cousin, whether in appearance or temperament, was very outstanding, equally matched with him. Standing together, they looked more like a pair of brothers than Levis. Cousin Meopal, everything went well. Cousin, you have become more beautiful than last year. Thank you for your praise, cousin, but compared to your beautiful face, I feel that you are mocking me. Li Weiwei looked at Meopal and said half jokingly and half seriously. Meopal laughed. This isn't something I can refuse. What do you say, List? The latter half of his sentence was directed at List. List smiled. He finally confirmed that Li Weiwei had bullied him for so many years because she was jealous of his looks. Cousin is right. Haha. Sure enough, heroes have the same point of view. Let's go into the castle. Father is away in charge of this season's tax collection, so he hasn't returned yet. Grandpa is recuperating. He's very happy to hear that you've come. How is Grandpa? Meopal sighed. Grandfather's illness is a complication caused by the relapse of an old injury, sometimes good, sometimes bad. The Grand Duke has already dispatched an imperial physician to treat grandfather. I believe he will get better. In the gorgeous bedroom, on the bed sat the master of Red Crab Island, one of the 7 marquises of the Grand Duchy, the former captain of the court fleet, and the most distinguished person in Longtaro Castle, Merlin Longtaro. This was an old man over 70 years of age, with a pale, wrinkled face. Although he still had the dignity of living like a prince for a long time, he could no longer hide the weakness of old age and illness. Even the Sky Knight, who could soar in the sky in the past, could not withstand the carving of the knife of time. His sapphire blue eyes had already turned white, not to mention his white hair. He was quietly leaning against the headboard with a short tea table placed on top of the quilt. He was using a quill dipped in ink to strenuously write on a thick bast paper. The age spots on his face were particularly conspicuous. Young Master Merlin has already brought the 3 young masters and young ladies of the Tulip family into the castle. The butler, who was almost as old as Marquis Merlin, could not bear to disturb him and spoke in a particularly light tone. Marquis Merlin's quill slightly paused before continuing to write without raising his head. Melissa's children, then let them come and visit this old man with half a foot in the grave. Master, you are only temporarily ill and will soon recover. You said that you would live to be 100 years old and outlive the neighboring Marquis Wallace. Ha. I also threatened the Grand Duke's sapphire dragon that I would kill it if it did not let me become the Dragon Lord. However, it was of no use. This time I will definitely lose to that old fart. Marquis Merlin laughed heartily, quickly finished writing the last few words, and put down the quill. The servant waiting on the side immediately took the tea table away. The old butler supported the Marquis, leaned against the headboard, and sat steadily. Then, he leaned over and adjusted the red bow tie on the Marquis' chest. A servant brought in a bronze mirror. The other servants served the Marquis one after another, some with water, some with towels, and some with hairpins. The Marquis carefully groomed his image, quickly returning to his dignified appearance from that of an old man with 1 foot in the grave. Then he waited. When he heard the familiar footsteps outside the door, his turbid eyes could not help but emit a glimmer of brilliance. He quickly hid it. Meopal, along with the 3 siblings, had already entered the bedroom. Levis took the lead and quickly walked to the bedside with Li Weiwei and List. He performed the etiquette of a junior to Marquis Merlin. Grandfather, Li Weiwei, List, and I have come to visit you. Father also entrusted me to bring you his sincere greetings, hoping that you will recover immediately and restore the graceful bearing of the Longtaro Castle's master. Your father is considerate. The Marquis nodded lightly. Was the journey smooth? It was smooth. That's good. Since you have come to visit grandfather, then stay in the Longtaro Castle for a few more days. Yes, grandfather. The Marquis gazed past Levis and Li Weiwei before landing on List. There was a look of nostalgia in his eyes. List, you have come of age. Yes, this year's 9th of March is my coming-of-age ceremony. I heard that your father enfeoffed you as Baron. Which town is it in? Flower Town. Not even a viscount. It seems that Lee William is a failure as a count. Marquis Merlin gave a very impolite evaluation. His tone once again became emotional. I did not witness your coming-of-age ceremony. Melissa will definitely blame me. Seeing you is like seeing Melissa standing in front of me. Meopal echoed. Grandfather, Cousin List is really too similar to Aunt Melissa. When I saw Aunt Melissa when I was a child, I felt that the long taro flower was the most dazzling flower in the Grand Duchy. I can no longer remember what Mother looked like. I can only admire her from the portrait in Tulip Castle, said List. His predecessor really did not have any memories of his mother. When List was 2 years old, Melissa had already died. What memories could a 2-year-old have? There were portraits of Melissa in the castle, but he did not often see them. Moreover, even if there were portraits, they were highly distorted, making it difficult to display the graceful bearing of the real person. It was a pity. Chapter 34. Chirp, chirp. On the corridor of the castle, there was a strange cry. List, who was going to rest until noon and then attend the luncheon, opened the door and saw that not far away, a blue sprite was flying around the pillars of the corridor. Several maids were serving the sprite. As if it had discovered List, the sprite flew over and hovered 1 meter in front of List. Its big eyes curiously looked at List, and from time to time it made a chirp sound, but no one knew what it said. Young Master List. The maids followed and greeted him respectfully. List asked, "What kind of sprite is this?" "It's a Pachyphyte sprite. It's only been born for 3 years." A pretty maid replied, her brown eyes darting a few glances at List. There was an inexplicable heat in her eyes. List didn't notice that the other party was looking at him. He stretched out his hand and pointed at the Pachyphyte sprite. "Does it have a name?" The sprite tilted its head and didn't understand. "Chirp," the maid replied. "No name. There are many sprites in the castle, you just need to call it worm grass. However, the Pachyphyte sprite is the most naughty of all sprites, so we need several maids to follow it to prevent it from causing trouble. Sprites are a magical species bred by nature. Most of them are very docile, but there are always some who are more tricky and eccentric. What kind of trouble can it cause?" List felt that it was making a fuss. 1 sprite and 1 maid should be enough, but there were several maids following it. It was a bit suspicious. But without waiting for the maids to explain, the hovering sprite suddenly pursed its mouth at List, and then, splat, a mouthful of saliva was spat on List's face. It was too sudden, and the Earth Knight didn't have the slightest time to react. By the time List came back to his senses, the little elf had already flown into the distance while laughing. "Young Master List, the Pachyphyte sprite is very naughty and often spits at the castle's guests. I'm very sorry. I hope you don't mind." The maid with a fiery gaze turned around and said to her companions, "Quickly follow the Pachyphyll. Don't let it disturb others. I'll take young Master List to wash his face." "Young Master List, please allow me to fetch some water for you to wash your face as an apology for the behavior of the Pachyphyllum sprite." "All right." List just wanted to wipe it off. The sprite wasn't a dirty creature, so he didn't mind its saliva. However, since the maid said so, he would just fetch some water to wash his face. The maid wrung the towel dry and was about to wipe List's face. "Thanks, I'll do it myself. This is what we maids are supposed to do. For things like washing my face, I'm used to doing it myself." List coughed. Although he understood that the upper class was very comfortable and had servants to serve them, he would never get used to it. After wiping his face, he handed the towel to the maid. The maid's eyes lit up. "Do you want me to wipe it again?" "No need." A disappointed look flashed across her face. The maid picked up the basin and got up to leave. "Then I'll go down first. By the way, young Master List, my name is Anna. If you need anything, I'm very willing to serve you." List smiled slightly. "Okay, Anna." At that moment, there was still a strand of wet hair on his forehead, which made him look even more handsome. The maid was obviously shaken by List. Then she lowered her head and quickly left the room. She walked out of the room. Only then did she feel that her chest was thumping and her cheeks were blushing slightly. "What are you doing?" She suddenly heard a questioning voice in her ear. It was a valet, the valet arranged for List by the castle. He was responsible for List's daily life during this time. He had just gone to the kitchen to get some milk tea for List. When he came back, he saw Anna coming out of the room with a basin in her hand. The work of serving the guests was his. Young Master List needs to wash his face, so I'm serving him. Is that so? This kind of thing doesn't seem to be done by you maids. Anna, don't do anything that will make Long Taro Castle lose face, the valet said in a low voice. Anna's footsteps did not stop. Leshy, you are not the housekeeper. What I do is none of your business. Then I'll tell the housekeeper. I'm just doing my job. How you want to sue me is your business. When Anna had completely disappeared around the corner of the corridor, Leshy coldly snorted, "A bunch of little bitches." After cursing, he quickly withdrew his angry expression and put on the dignified and appropriate demeanor that a valet should have, as well as a calm and elegant expression. He knocked on the door. "Young Master List, I have brought you the milk tea you wanted. Please come in." Anna returned to the team that was looking after the Pachyphyllum sprites. The maids immediately asked, "Anna, did you touch young Master List's face? Is young Master List's face particularly smooth and delicate? Did you blush and your heart beat faster at that time? He is as handsome as young Master List." A few years ago, Lucy touched young Master List's face when he was washing his face. But at that time he was not yet an adult, but he was already so handsome. Anna shook her head and said with disappointment, "No, young Master List washes his face by himself. He doesn't like maids to wash his face for him." "How can that be? Could it be that he also likes men like Viscount Orpheus?" "Probably not. I saw young Master List last year. He was staring at Sister Luya's butt. Sister Luya's butt is indeed beautiful. I'm jealous." "Then you need to pat it every day. Otherwise you won't have a butt at all. By the way, young Master List is already an adult. He should have been in theft. What is his title now? I think it's a Viscount." "I heard that the Tulip family's Coral Island is also a large island. I don't know, if Miss Melissa was still alive, with Master as her backing, she would definitely be in theft as a Viscount. But the Earl of Coral Island has already married a new countess. Young Master List's situation should be rather awkward. I really want to comfort him." "Stop daydreaming. Do you need a maid like you to worry about the affairs of the nobles? I advise you all to calm down and do your job as maids with peace of mind. An ugly duckling will not become a white swan, the descendants of ducks will only be ducks, and the descendants of swans will be swans. So what? I've already decided to be like Mrs. Feeney, never marry for the rest of my life. You still don't allow me to create a romantic encounter for myself?" Chapter 35. List did not know what the maid was thinking. He had never thought of being like the majority of aristocrats, irresponsibly messing around in other people's castles. His current body was only 16 years old and had just reached adulthood. According to the laws of his hometown, 18 years old was considered an adult and 22 years old could be married. Right now, his body was at ease and there was no need to think too much as it would damage his energy. His predecessor was a good-for-nothing, but the current List was very confident in becoming a Sky Knight. After all, his perception was not bad and he had the help of the Smoke Mission. Maybe in the future he could ride a dragon and become a Dragon Knight. The world's top fighting force was the Dragon Knight, an existence that could easily destroy heaven and earth. The cultivation of fiery dragon drill and fire surge fluctuations cannot stop. Although I can avoid going to the battlefield, the ability to protect myself must always be cultivated. The luncheon was a family banquet in the Long Taro Castle, and there were not many people. Masiro and his wife were in charge of tax collection in other places. In the castle, there were only two masters, the grandfather and the grandson. According to the rules of the Long Taro Castle, the knight captain did not eat in the castle, and Miopal's tutor had gone to the city to become an official. Therefore, there were only the grandfather and grandson, as well as the three siblings sitting around the table. Marquis Merlin was in a wheelchair, so it was inconvenient for him to walk. The food in the castle was a grade higher than that in the Tulip Castle. The bread on the plate was proof of this. It was the best white bread. List picked up a piece of white bread and took a bite. It was soft and fragrant, and had a wonderful texture that melted in the mouth. It was almost not like bread, but cake. The wine was the red wine from the cellar of the Razy Manor, which was a grade higher than the Crescent red wine. As the plates were opened, roast beef pudding, salmon in golden sauce, cooked eggs, frozen rock lobster with mayonnaise, roast goose with lettuce salad, meat pie with cheese, asparagus leaves, and trout in lobster sauce. The sumptuousness was comparable to that of a major festival banquet in the Tulip Castle. However, although the dishes were plentiful, the atmosphere was rather stiff. The Marquis was a serious person and had been in charge of the navy. Could be said that he had a strong aura. In front of the Marquis, Levis and Li Weiwei couldn't be at ease and spoke cautiously. List was also somewhat restrained. Mentally, he did not think that a group of ancient people was anything special, but in reality he could not be calm when he was with strangers. Therefore, it was more important to try to eat something delicious, especially the frozen rock lobster with mayonnaise. It was very delicious. He had already finished one plate, so he ordered another. Rock lobsters are produced in the waters of Red Crab Island. My family's fleet rarely goes out to sea to catch them. It's mostly fishermen who risk their lives to catch them. The production is not high, and almost all of them are sent to the castle. Miopal nibbled on the bread and said, "If you like it, I will have someone prepare a batch of live prawns for you. I am afraid that it is not easy to transport. The distance from the Longtaro Castle to my flower town is too far. I need to walk half a day on the Red Crab Island, take a boat for a day, and then walk half a day to the flower town. Including accommodation and other delays, it will take at least 5 days to return. Actually, rock lobsters are very easy to raise. As long as you give them some water every day, they won't die easily since they have the bloodline of the sea monster, the ornate lobster. Sea monsters were the World of Warcraft of the sea." List naturally did not object. "Thank you very much. You are welcome." Miopal smiled. Among the 3 siblings of the Tulip family, he was closer to List. It was probably because of their mutual admiration for each other, or because birds of a feather flock together. Handsome people would always be friends with other handsome people. When the Marquis heard the conversation between the two, he suddenly said, "List, tell me about the flower town." "Grandfather, life in the flower town is, in fact, mediocre. The local customs, the living environment, they can all be talked about. It is a small town with less than 2,000 people. In the beginning, a new tulip was discovered. Therefore, father migrated his subjects and built the flower town. Now, wheat is mainly planted. The land is relatively barren and the taxes are very low. Fortunately, a new type of tulip magic ingredient has grown in the town, which can bring about new development." "A new type of magic ingredient? This is a good thing." The Marquis asked, "Did Tulip Castle pay a large amount of gold coins for this magic ingredient?" "It is a division. The town cannot grow too much. I reached an agreement with my brother and sister to grow it together. However, they have to give me 30% of the profits." "Oh, it is a very interesting cooperation. It is far more valuable than gold coins. List, you have not only inherited Melissa's beauty, but also the shrewdness of the Taro family." The shrewdness of the Taro family was very famous in the Grand Duchy. The reason for this was that the Marquis father, who was the previous Marquis, was just a count at that time. Because the Grand Duchy was preparing to go to the continent to compete for minerals, it was in urgent need of funds to arm the orders of chivalry. Therefore, the Count spent all of his family's wealth to support the Sapphire Grand Duke's actions, ultimately obtaining the Red Crab Island and the position of Marquis. Now, the annual income of the Red Crab Island was probably more than what the Count had spent all of his family's wealth. It was a good deal. The flower town is just a small town. I need to make money in order to maintain the castle's expenses. Self-reliance. These are the qualities of a qualified aristocrat. Courage, courtesy, loyalty, self-reliance. There were a lot of qualities that aristocrats often talked about. Among them, the most unworthy of the name was self-reliance. They were basically a group of vampires who squeezed ordinary people dry. From childhood to adulthood, they probably didn't even know what a hoe looked like. Of course, the self-reliance that the Marquis spoke of probably meant that they could rely on themselves to squeeze, instead of asking for help from their family. After the luncheon was the banquet. After the banquet, there was a rest. The next day, there was another luncheon. After the luncheon, Miopol got busy. According to the Marquis' instructions, he planned to hold a grand ball that evening, summoning the young aristocrats from the nearby towns. An aristocratic ball could be simply regarded as a blind date. In particular, the second and third sons of aristocrats were most keen on participating in this kind of ball. The eldest son could inherit his father's title and didn't have to worry about not being able to find a marriage partner. The second and third sons, on the other hand, needed to work hard and strive to marry a fair-skinned, rich and beautiful woman so that they could continue to enjoy the aristocratic life. Otherwise, generation after generation, they would eventually be reduced to ordinary knight and fall out of the aristocratic class. Female aristocrats were also keen on balls. Not every young lady could marry the eldest son of an aristocrat. They also needed to target those aristocratic descendants with potential and develop their charm. List, you need to prepare. Miopol brought over a pile of formal clothes with his valet. These are formal clothes that I have never worn before. Our stature is about the same, so they will definitely suit you. Cousin, there is no need to try them one by one. I think the one I am wearing is very good. No, you must strive for perfection. Think about it. Yesterday, I arranged for a knight to quickly send out a notice. At least 13 aristocrats from small towns have received invitations and can rush over to participate in the ball. How many beautiful young ladies are waiting to form a good marriage with you and achieve a beautiful encounter? I am still young. I am not in a hurry to get married. Liszt was a bit speechless. How come he didn't discover that this cousin of his was so keen on matchmaking? You should dress up my elder sister. She is at the marriageable age. There is also my elder brother. He also needs to find a suitable mistress candidate for Tulip Castle. They don't need me to remind them. Levis has already borrowed a lot of formal clothes, and Li Weiwei has been dressing up since morning. Didn't you notice? Is that so? Chapter 36. A close-fitting swallow-tailed coat, wavy hair, and the bright powder that he was forced to apply on his face. The freshly baked Liszt was dazzling. Perfect! Miopol patted Liszt's shoulder. You will be the focus of all the men at tonight's ball. I have no such intention. Maybe in a few years, I will be very enthusiastic. Right now, I am sorry, cousin, but I do not intend to get to know any aristocratic ladies. If you don't mean what you say, I won't believe it. Don't worry, Liszt. The best thing in life is to meet the right person at the right time. Don't say let nature take its course, you have to seize the opportunity. Cousin, is this the reason why you have been unmarried for so many years? Don't change the topic to me. We are now talking about you. Liszt shook his cuffs. Miopol was very good to him. In fact, he wanted to tell his cousin that instead of chasing after the Sapphire Grand Duke's daughter, which might cause the Taro family to be thrown out of the cage, it would be better to find a female aristocrat and marry her. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he swallowed them back. This situation definitely had the will of the Marquis. The Taro family boasted of their shrewdness, and it was possible that they wanted to go a step further. Once they married the Sapphire Grand Duke's daughter, the family's status would be unshakable. As a rural baron of a small town, it was better for him not to eat coarse bread and worry about the Marquis. After dressing up gorgeously, he followed Miopol to the hall where the ball was about to be held. There were already aristocrats in 2s and 3s who had arrived and were chatting in the hall while enjoying the wine prepared by the servants. Sir Miopol, you are finally willing to come out? An aristocrat walked over with a wine glass. It is not yet time for the ball. No need to be anxious, Martyr. Martyr looked at Liszt. This is my cousin. His father is the Earl of Coral Island. So it turns out to be the Tulip family. Nice to meet you. I am Martyr Crossbow. Liszt Tulip. Liszt maintained a polite smile, but it was not very enthusiastic. He was not a sociable noble, so he had no choice but to attend this ball. But then, he could only helplessly endure. Under Meople's introduction, he got to know the young aristocrats of Red Crab Island. Basically, they were followers of the Taro family. Nobles enfeoffed by the Marquis were completely loyal to the Marquis. The interesting thing about the aristocracy was this. The nobles enfeoffed by the king were the retainers of the king, and the lesser nobles enfeoffed by the nobles were the retainers of the nobles. However, the minor nobles who were enfeoffed by the nobles were not the king's retainers and did not have to swear loyalty to the king. For example, Lee William, the Earl of Coral Island, was a noble enfeoffed by the king. He was the king's retainer, but List was not. He only needed to be loyal to his father. After his father passed away, he would have to pledge his loyalty to his elder brother, Levis. Is there a beautiful young lady you fancy? If there is, tell me, I can help you pull some strings. Don't be restrained. After greeting the guests, Meople returned to List's side. Look at your brother. He has completely adapted to the scene of the ball and has already hooked up with the daughters of 3 viscounts. Following his gaze, one could see the average-looking Levis saying something that made a young lady laugh heartily. There is also your elder sister. Someone is also trying to curry favor with him. On Li Weiwei's side, there were 2 male aristocrats chatting and laughing with her. She could not be considered beautiful, but with a little inquiry, one could find out that Li Weiwei had the title of Baron. For those Lord Knight or aristocrats who were unable to inherit their family's title, she was an excellent marriage partner. After getting married, they could continue to enjoy their aristocratic status. List raised the fruit wine in his hand and clinked it with Meople's. I hope they can find happiness soon. As for me, cousin, you really don't have to worry about me. Really? Really? All right, but I will still help you keep an eye out for suitable young ladies. There is no need for that. List was speechless. This cousin of his was too much. Was he so keen on being a matchmaker? Meople shrugged his shoulders slightly and whispered to him. In fact, this is Grandpa's intention. He knows that you are not valued in the Tulip family and hopes that you can come to Red Crab Island. Besides, I also need helpers. The Taro family is not very prosperous and I have no brothers or sisters. I really hope that you can come. List felt that Meople was speaking from the bottom of his heart. According to his conversion of units of measurement, the Coral Island was equivalent to a prefecture-level city, about 10,000 square kilometers. The Red Crab Island was 10 times the size of the Coral Island, about 100,000 square kilometers. The area was equivalent to the area of the provinces of Jiangsu and Zhejiang. There were no roads, and transportation depended on horses. The larger the area, the more difficult it was to manage. Moreover, the aristocracy was not a centralized way of power. The more minor aristocrats were enfeoffed, the more chaotic the management of the territory would be, and even the foundation of the ruling family would be shaken. After thinking about it, it would be a lie to say that he was not tempted. The flower town was a remote and desolate place, and it really did not have much development value. If he came to Red Crab Island to develop, the Taro family would at least raise his status by a rank viscount, which would allow him to have a small city as a fief. However, to rely on a woman to achieve this goal, List was very resistant. Let nature take its course, cousin. If there is someone I like, I will not miss it. If there is something I don't like, then don't force me. All right? At nightfall, the dance party began. Soothing piano music came from the fingertips of a pianist, creating a suitable atmosphere for the dance party. As the host, Meople and a viscount's daughter danced the first opening dance, and then retreated, indicating that everyone was free to partner up. Sitting in a corner, List watched the young men and women dance gracefully on the dance floor. There was no action. He had already sized up all the women participating in the dance party. Tall, short, fat, thin, beautiful, and ugly. Unfortunately, there was no woman who could move his heart. Even though there were a few mature women who conformed to his aesthetic standards, but age was an obstacle. After all, he was only 16 years old. At this age, many aristocrats had already begun to be dissolute. However, he was still not at the marriageable age. Only when men reached 20 and women reached 18 would it be the restless season for marriage. His gaze passed through the crowd and fell on an unknown place in the void. Then, after a moment, an invisible smoke gradually appeared, forming distorted serpentines. Mission. Not only cows like to eat fresh and tender alfalfa, horses also like to eat it. This is the foundation for establishing a horse farm, as well as the starting point for establishing a career. Please help the alfalfa sprite worm settle down its worm stalk. Reward: 3 wild corn stalks. The mission had already existed for several days, so he was somewhat anxious. After being delayed for several days, the alfalfa grass should have already grown. When I return, I should be able to settle down the alfalfa sprite worm. Wild corn, I don't know what it looks like, but its output should be at least several times that of wheat. Just as he was thinking about the mission, suddenly, he heard a pleasant voice like that of an oriole. "Hey, List, can I sit here?" The smoke suddenly dissipated. List recovered and saw a 17 or 18-year-old girl. She looked a bit like the second daughter of the Count, Edith, from Downton Abbey. She had wavy flaxen hair, a sharp nose, deep eye sockets, and thin lips that seemed to be smiling. It was very standard, more than 8 out of 10. Meopel had previously introduced her to him. She was the youngest daughter of a viscount called Athena Salmon. Her family was famous for producing salmon. Chapter 37. I didn't see you dance, so why didn't you go? Athena asked while taking a sip of juice. I'm not very skilled in dancing, so I just quietly appreciate other people's dances. Then you should go down and dance. The dance steps are very simple. You can learn them after a few times. Blinking her eyes, Athena had an expectant look on her face. If you want to learn, I can teach you. Since the lady took the initiative, List couldn't refuse. He could only stand up and extend his hand. Can I ask you to dance? It would be my honor. Athena extended her hand to List and stood up. In this way, List took Athena to the dance floor. Accompanied by soothing piano music, he put his arm around Athena's waist, held her left hand, and began to dance together on the dance floor. The aristocratic ballroom dances had always been very simple. List himself had never danced, but his predecessor had considerable experience. Your dance is not jerky. It seems that you were deceiving me just now, Athena said with a smile as she danced. Perhaps it is because I am performing exceptionally. Is that so? Then I believe you. After a moment of silence, Athena asked again, I have never been to Coral Island. In fact, I have never left Red Crab Island. Is Coral Island very far from Red Crab Island? It is not far. It is a voyage of more than half a day. If the wind is favorable all the way, then it may take half a day. What does Tulip Castle look like? It is built on a cliff on the shore. It is much smaller than Longtaro Castle. However, the surrounding hillsides are covered with tulip. It must be very beautiful. If there is a chance, I would like to visit Tulip Castle. There will be a chance. Do you live in Tulip Castle? I grew up there. However, I have now gone to live in my own town. Yes. I heard from Sir Meopel that you have been infeft as Baron in Flower Town. Yes. There must be a lot of beautiful flowers there. Is the castle where you live also surrounded by flowers? I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. There's only a dozen or so mu of tulip. The rest of the land is planted with wheat. As for the surroundings of the castle, I'm preparing to plant grass, build a horse farm, and maybe raise some cows. Liszt said indifferently. He had a feeling that Athena was inquiring about his situation. Perhaps this girl was attracted by his handsome appearance and wanted to become Baron Liszt's wife? It was better to interrupt her thoughts as soon as possible. After a pause, he continued, Well, the location of the town is very remote. There is not enough wheat to eat, milk to drink, and even vegetables to eat often. Even if you have gold coins, it is difficult to buy meat. Because it's separated by a mountain ridge, and there's World of Warcraft in the mountain ridge, merchants aren't willing to enter. Athena opened her mouth in surprise. Are you Earth Knight? I just advanced recently, and I'm still familiarizing myself with the Do Chi secret manual. Liszt, who was 1.8 meters tall, lowered his head and saw that Athena, who was 1.6 meters tall at most, had a slightly stiff expression on her face. It was probably the gap between ideals and reality that had troubled her. Anyone who saw Liszt for the first time would definitely have a good impression of him. Of course, it was mainly women, but after understanding Liszt's background, it was likely that he would have to retreat. He was not valued, was poor, and was a baron from a remote town. His aptitude for qi was also not good. Sooner or later, he would have to sell his fief and wander under another lord. Managing a fief was not a simple matter. Many small aristocrats would go bankrupt and fall to the point of becoming tutors or knight captains. Gort was one of them. Even great aristocrats would go bankrupt and lose their fief if they did not manage their business well. Next, it's probably time to let go, indicating the end of the dance. Liszt thought. However, Athena did not loosen her grip. Her slightly stiff expression quickly reverted to her previous faint smile. Your father, the Count of Coral Island, would not turn a blind eye to the flower town, right? My relationship with my father is not too harmonious, maybe because my brother and sister are too outstanding. But I feel that your temperament is more outstanding. When you stand together with Sir Meople, you look like a pair of brothers. I am more like my mother. Your mother must have been a graceful and luxurious aristocratic madam. I actually don't remember what she looked like. She passed away when I was 2 years old. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it. It doesn't matter. Next, the two of them did not speak. With their arms around each other's waist, they finished the dance. During the break, Liszt returned to his seat. He did not expect Athena to follow him. Then she sat next to him and still tried to find something to talk about. My family is in Whitefish City. The castle has no name. I also have a brother. He is married to Sister Lydia of Viscount Xavier's family. They met at a ball in Longtaro Castle last year. Oh, no wonder I didn't see your brother come today. Liszt was somewhat perfunctory. He and Sister Lydia have a very good relationship and rarely participate in this kind of social ball. Athena blinked. My father is very hospitable. Liszt, if you have time, you can come to my house as a guest. I'm afraid I don't have time. Grandfather is still recovering. I have to return to Coral Island tomorrow. When will you come again? At New Year's Day. Oh, the piano music sounded again, and Liszt and Athena danced again. Then, with the excuse that the dance floor was too stuffy, he refused Athena's hope of continuing to dance with him. When he came back from the castle, the ball was already coming to an end. As the music stopped, Meople, representing the host, announced that the ball was over. The aristocrats in 2s and 3s directly returned by carriage. As for those who were far away, they were led by servants to the rooms arranged by the castle. Liszt was also ready to return to his room. Athena came over again and only said, "Good night, Liszt." "Good night, Athena." Before returning to his room, Meople came over. "Liszt, did you have a good chat with Athena?" "Just 2 dances. I can see that Athena is very interested in you. What do you think?" "I don't think so." Seeing that Liszt was serious, Meople nodded. "Well, I understand. Have a good rest. Right, tomorrow, Grandfather said that he will give you a coming-of-age gift. It's a pity that he didn't witness your coming-of-age ceremony. He hopes to make up for it a little. Grandfather is too polite. Well, good night. Good night." Late at night, Liszt was still awake. He repeatedly thought about the coming-of-age gift the Marquis was going to give him. With the Marquis taking action, it shouldn't be too bad. Maybe it's a magic sword? Among aristocrats, especially the gifts from the elders to the younger generation, most of them were weapons, implying that the glory of a knight needed to be won with a sharp blade and a spear. For the Marquis to give a weapon, it should at least be a magic weapon. Magic weapons were very precious, and he had never owned one before. Therefore, the more he thought about it, the more excited he became. The more he thought about it, the more enthusiastic Athena was. Both inside and outside revealed that she liked Liszt and wanted to be the Baron's wife. She was liked. And she was a beautiful lady. Chapter 38. Early the next morning, List, who had slightly dark circles under his eyes, had already packed his luggage. He also enjoyed a breakfast in his room: bread, fried eggs, shortbread, jam, milk, honey, and coffee. After Levis and Li Weiwei had also packed their things, the three siblings were ready to bid farewell to the Marquis. The Marquis got up early and was sitting in his wheelchair, writing something. "Did you sleep well?" The Marquis stopped writing, raised his head, and looked at the three tall siblings. "I heard that you had a good time at last night's ball?" Levis replied with a smile. "It was a very comfortable night, grandfather. The ball hosted by cousin made us very happy, and we got to know a lot of aristocratic ladies. I was moved by some of the beautiful ladies." "That's good. Take advantage of the fact that you are young and moved." After exchanging a few words, the three siblings said their goodbyes. The Marquis did not urge them to stay. He just said to List, "I was not able to witness your coming-of-age ceremony. To make up for this regret, I will give you a gift. Miopal, bring the prepared gift and give it to List." Miopal soon came in with a long box in his hands. When List saw the box, he immediately understood that his guess was correct. The gift from the Marquis was indeed what the elders liked to give to the younger generation: a weapon. What kind of magic weapon will it be? List was somewhat impatient. Miopal handed over the box. "List, grandfather will give you this red blood sword. I hope you can use it to cut through the thorns and blossom with the dazzling brilliance of a knight." Red blood sword? List opened the box. Suddenly, a bright, snow-white knight two-handed sword entered his eyes. The slender blade, the slender crossguard, and the slender hilt looked just like a German two-handed sword. At the intersection of the sword guard and the sword hilt, there was a fiery red gemstone embedded in it. Just by looking at it, one could feel the magic power emitted by the fiery red gem circulating ceaselessly throughout the entire sword. It could even be seen that there were tiny red marks that looked like blood vessels appearing on the blade. No wonder it was called Red Blood Sword despite being snow-white. Most importantly, it was not a magic weapon, but a gem weapon that was better than magic weapons. Ruby? When Li Weiwei saw the ruby on the crossguard and hilt, she was immediately shocked. At the same time, her eyes were filled with envy and jealousy. An ordinary magic weapon was worth about 100 gold coins. However, a gemstone weapon was worth thousands of gold coins, and it was a magic weapon that was 10 times the price. Just this red blood sword alone was estimated to be worth several years of taxes of a wealthy town. Her Falcon Town was more or less a wealthy town. After a few years of living frugally, it was barely enough for her to buy a gemstone weapon. However, it was impossible for her to give up her luxurious lifestyle, so it was very likely that she would never be able to afford it. Her heart was filled with jealousy, and with her straightforward personality, she immediately said, "Grandfather, you are too biased towards List. You only gave me a set of clothes as my coming-of-age present. For your coming-of-age ceremony, didn't the Coral Islands boy give you a lesser sprite and also confer you the title of Baron? But List can't enjoy it. The Coral Islands boy is allowed to be biased, but I'm not allowed to be biased?" The Marquis spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. At the same time, he revealed his dissatisfaction with the Earl of Coral Island. List immediately showed off. "Thank you for the gift, grandfather. I will treat the red blood sword well and not let its brilliance be covered in dust." If he sold a gemstone weapon, he could immediately get 1,000 or 2,000 gold coins. Of course, he would not sell it. The ruby embedded in the red blood sword clearly had the attribute of fire, could assist him in his training. This was more effective than using magic ingredients to assist his training. Products of dragons were bound to be fine. With the red blood sword in hand, List, under the watchful eyes of Miopal and a large group of servants, prepared to return. His short 2-day stay as a guest in the Longtaro Castle was over. He was not too reluctant to leave. After all, there were still a lot of things waiting for him in the Flower Town. Gold or silver nests were not as good as his doghouse. Just as he was about to board the carriage, someone suddenly shouted, "List, wait!" He looked back and saw Athena. "Good morning, Miss Athena." "Good morning." Athena was slightly out of breath. She had probably run over from the castle. "Are you going back?" "Yes." Levis, who had boarded the carriage, suddenly interjected. "If there is a beautiful girl looking forward to me, then I would rather not go back." List turned around and glared at him. "Brother, please get on the carriage." Levis shrugged. "Miss Athena, you two talk." "Thank you, Sir Levis." Leaving List and Athena alone, Athena grasped the corner of her clothes. "Aren't you going to stay for a few more days? There are a lot of things waiting for me to deal with in the town. Will you come to White City as a guest?" Her eyes were full of expectation. List smiled and refused. "Sorry, I have no reason to visit your family. I don't know your father, and I don't have any connections." There was always a reason for the communication between aristocrats. One could not visit for no reason. "You can come and find me." When Athena finished speaking, she lowered her head. The meaning was clear: an unmarried man and an unmarried woman. There was only one kind of relationship between them. List secretly sighed. He felt that his next words might hurt the lovely little girl's heart, but he had to say it. "Miss Athena, thank you for your love, but I have not considered the possibility between us. Please do not worry about me. You are so beautiful. There must be many people better than me pursuing you." Athena's eyes quickly dimmed, but soon she was full of smiles again. "Thank you for your frankness, Sir List. I wish you a pleasant journey." "Thank you, take care," List said and turned to enter the carriage. The coachman raised his whip, and the horse pulled the carriage, galloping quickly down the mountain. There was no dust on the gravel road, only the clanking of the wheels. "List, you're so cruel to reject a noble lady's love just like that." Li Weiwei showed an indescribable emotion, probably doubtful that her weak brother could refuse someone else. "I don't feel anything. Why do I force myself and harm others?" He looked back through the window and saw Athena still standing at the castle gate in the distance. The clothes that wrapped around her petite and exquisite body swayed gently in the wind. She was courageous, but he could not accept it. He wanted to be sentimental for 10 minutes. But Li Weiwei's cold snort interrupted the atmosphere. "There is no need for feelings in a noble marriage." "There is no need? Then why don't you just marry someone with good conditions?" "Because I don't want to be a vassal. Even if I want to marry, the groom must come to Falcon Town. Or, they have the charm to let me give up Falcon Town and live in their castle. If I really meet such a person, why can't I give up my body and mind?" Li Weiwei said arrogantly. List did not say anything. A moment later, Li Weiwei stretched out her hand. "Let me see the red blood sword." Waving the exquisitely crafted red blood sword and the ruby that was brimming with magic, Li Weiwei could not hide her jealousy. "Why does grandfather treat you so well? I might not be able to use a gemstone sword in my entire life. List, it is too wasteful for you to use it. Give it to me, I can give you 100 naldas." Chapter 39. 3 days later, List returned to the Coral Islands flower town. Tulip Castle's night squad escorted him back to the flower town. In addition to List and Marcus, there were also 2 destitute aristocrats. They were all descendants of aristocrats, yet they had not inherited the title of nobility and could only be called knight. They were friends introduced by Gort. Tempted by the double salary, they came to the flower town to serve as an official. "List, welcome back. You have only been gone for a little more than a week, yet I have already begun to miss you." Gort greeted the town's lord with a slightly exaggerated tone. His enthusiasm was exaggerated but thoughtful. "And Marcus, loyal knight of Baron. Seeing that you are neatly dressed, I know that everything went smoothly. Haha, look who these two are, Isaiah and Blair, my old friends. I am very happy to see that you have come together with Baron. Obviously, you have chosen the flower town." Next, the small castle prepared to hold a banquet for the night squad who were escorting List and his party. Before the banquet began, List, regardless of the dust, quickly carried the jade box containing the alfalfa sprite worm and arrived at the completed stud farm in front of the castle. The ground was already lush green. The alfalfa sprouted very quickly. Summer was approaching, and the temperature would promote their growth. Little fellow, come out. The plump alfalfa sprite worm, with purple patterns on its body, was very beautiful. Compared to the lazy tulip worm, it was very spirited. It opened its mouth and spat out the cordyceps. As a result, in the middle of the stud farm, the alfalfa sprouted and grew rapidly. Compared to ordinary alfalfa, the cordyceps were bigger and stronger, and they bloomed purple flowers. Don't forget to install guardrails around to prevent the horses from destroying the growth of the cordyceps. Liszt ordered his valet Thomas. The castle was directly responsible for elven-related matters, so there was no need for the town's officials or serfs to take care of them. Master, please rest assured, I will start building the guardrails. When Liszt returned to the castle, the butler, old Carter, welcomed him. Master, the banquet is ready. You can take your seat. Then let's begin. Compared to the banquets Liszt had eaten a few years ago, the Flower Town Castle's banquets were like heaven and earth. However, he preferred the current atmosphere because he was the most distinguished person among the people present. First of all, I would like to thank Lord Loudon and the Night Squad for escorting me all the way. First, I would like to thank Lord Loudon and the Night Town. After downing a glass of beer, the servant immediately refilled it. Liszt then raised a second glass. I wish Isaiah and Blair a happy life in Flower Town. Thank you, Sir Baron, for your blessings. I hope to contribute to the development of Flower Town. Finally, I would like to pay my respects to my teacher, Gort. While I was away, he managed everything for me. That is what I should do, Liszt. As long as there is good wine to drink every day, I am willing to get drunk in the Flower Town. Gort laughed heartily. Manage the Flower Town when you are sober, and drink when you eat. Liszt said. Of course, work and good wine are not neglected at the same time. Ha. The atmosphere was harmonious as the lunch was enjoyed. After seeing off the Night Squad, Liszt returned to the castle for a lunch break. Lying on his bed, he concentrated a little and the familiar smoke mission appeared. The serpentines finally changed. Mission completed. Reward, 3 wild corn. In a flash, the smoke changed and a new mission was issued. Mission. As the Lord, it is your duty to take care of the sprites. Have you forgotten about the wheat sprite worm? Its ability can produce more food for the territory. Please help the wheat sprite worm settle down its worm stalk. Reward. Information on the invisible dragon. Information on the invisible dragon? What kind of reward is this? A bold idea suddenly emerged in Liszt's mind. Could it be that the smoke mission is going to reward me with a dragon? That shouldn't be the case. This is a bit too satisfying. A dragon. It is an existence that can suppress the destiny of a state. However, what does the invisible dragon mean? Invisible? A shapeless dragon? According to the memories of his predecessor, there were 3 major types of dragons. The first type was the gem dragon. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's sapphire dragon was a type of gem dragon that could produce sapphires. The red blood sword that Marquis Merlin gifted to Liszt had rubies inlaid on it. They were also gems produced by gem dragons and had mystical powers. The second type was the metal dragon. In the Night Squad novel, the white iron dragon that fought against the sapphire dragon was a metal dragon that could produce iron or... There were more metal dragons than gem dragons, especially the iron dragons. Liszt had heard a lot about them through the various Night Squad novel. The third type was the elemental dragons, such as fire dragons and water dragons, which were very difficult to tame. Moreover, because of their strong magic elements, their destructive power was astonishing. They could easily destroy towns and injure countless people. In the Night Squad novel, they were often the targets of the Dragon Slayer warriors. Humans were very strange animals. They worshipped dragons but also wanted to kill them. Gem, metal, elemental, which one would the invisible dragon be? Liszt couldn't figure it out. He decided to ask others. He called the butler, Carter. Mr. Carter, have you heard of the invisible dragon? Carter thought for a moment. I have not heard of it, master. In the afternoon, he took the retainer knight to the town to look for Gort and his two friends. He also wanted to try his luck and see where he could get the 3 wild corn plants as a reward. Invisible dragon? Gort touched his chin. I seem to have heard of it somewhere. Isaiah? Blair? Do you remember? Isaiah and Blair carefully recalled and shook their heads at the same time. In the end, after half an hour of reminiscing, Gort was unable to recall whether he had heard of the invisible dragon or not. When people get old, they tend to get confused. List, I am very sorry. Maybe I was mistaken. Sorry for wasting your time. I might not have heard of the invisible dragon. That's nothing. By the way, Teacher Gort, what are your arrangements for Isaiah and Blair? I am in charge of government affairs. Isaiah is in charge of finance, and Blair is in charge of legal affairs and diplomacy. Since there are arrangements, I will leave the development of the flower town to the 3 of you. List did not stay in the town for long. He was confident that the flower town could be developed and strengthened. However, it was only limited to telling Gort and his subordinates about his intentions and getting them to carry out the specific tasks. First, having him do it himself would be contrary to the aristocratic system. Aristocrats who worked in the fields were not called aristocrats, and aristocrats who ate with serfs were not called aristocrats. Second, if he were to arrange the specific tasks himself, it might not be effective and would be a waste of energy. For example, if he could clearly have his servants complete the census, why would he have to do it himself? With great difficulty, he had finally transmigrated to become an aristocrat. If he did not enjoy it, he would have to work himself to death. After returning to the castle, List mused, since the reward is information on the invisible dragon, it means that I probably won't get the reward before I complete the mission? In other words, no one knows what the invisible dragon is. Someone will probably come and tell me after I complete the mission? Chapter 40. Just as List settled the wheat sprite worm's worm stalk, the wheat settlement steward, Gajiel, suddenly told him something. Sir Lord, I don't know if I should say it or not. Please say it. List's eyes lit up. He felt that the steward might want to reveal information about the invisible dragon. Gajiel, however, said, Sir Lord, I found 3 very strange grasses in the wheat settlement's wasteland. They are extremely tall, 2 or 3 meters tall, and are green and oily. Our chickens are very fond of eating their leaves. It's corn. List immediately realized that the steward was not providing clues about the invisible dragon, but 3 wild corn. He immediately ordered the steward to take him there. Corn, the corn he was looking forward to. But when he arrived before the wild corn, List fell into doubt. Gajiel, how long has it been since you found these 3 grasses? It's been 3 months. Has it always looked like this? Yes, Sir Lord. List habitually touched the red blood sword hanging at his waist. He had always kept this sword close to him. The ruby's magic power constantly stimulated his fire-attributed chi, nourishing it and strengthening it. In other words, he was cultivating all the time while carrying a sword. If he ate more magic potions in the future, he might be able to become a Sky Knight. List couldn't help but look at the 3 wild corn. The corn in front of him was not a straight pole. It had a few leaves, a cluster of flowers at the top, and 1 or 2 cobs in the middle. Instead, it was randomly divided into a few poles, and each pole had a cluster of flowers on top of it. As for the corn cob in the middle, there were a few tiny toothpicks instead. The toothpicks were segmented, and each segment was a grass seed. Don't tell me that wild corn looks like this. This is not corn, this is wheat. List was very hurt. He knew very well that the 3 wild corn were the 3 grasses in front of him. But he couldn't accept it. What happened to the big, plump corn cob? This is grass for livestock to eat. I remember now. These 3 stalks of wild corn seem to be called Mexican corn grass? List, who had planted crops in his hometown, remembered that someone in the village had planted some kind of pigweed, which was for pigs to eat. It was called Mexican corn grass, and it was said to be a very high-yielding pasture that pigs, cows, and sheep especially liked to eat. That should be it. If it's real corn, there's no need to put the word wild in front of it. Corn doesn't seem to have any wild varieties. It's artificially cultivated for millions of years. After he understood this point, he could only sigh in his heart and comfort himself. At least I got a high-yielding pasture. It's not a loss. Get rid of your depressed mood. List put on the reserved smile of a noble again. Gajeel, according to my judgment, this grass is called corn grass. It's a very high-yielding and popular pasture for livestock. Chickens, ducks, geese, pigs, cows, and sheep all like to eat it. From now on, you have to take good care of it. I need its seeds. Yes, Sir Lord. Gajeel will take good care of the corn grass and not let any serfs or livestock get close to it. That's good. I will inform Teacher Gort. When the time comes, he will make further arrangements. You just have to cooperate. Yes, Sir Lord. Glancing at the Mexican corn grass again, List took a deep breath and raised his horsewhip. Return! The little wheat sprite's wormstalk was settled very smoothly. So far, the peanut sprite, alfalfa sprite, tulip sprite, and wheat sprite had all been properly settled. As for the remaining thorn sprite, it was unknown where to go. The corn sprite's cornfield was still being planned. In any case, the elves would receive the best care. On the way back, List bumped into Marcus, who was about to come to the castle to see him. Teacher Marcus, what's the matter? Sir, I heard from Sir Gort that you asked him about the invisible dragon. Oh, you know about the invisible dragon? I have heard of it, Marcus said earnestly. I read about it in a half-torn night novel. I don't know the name of the novel, but I read it when I was very young. Is that so? What is the description of the invisible dragon? List knew that the wheat sprite mission was completed and the reward was coming. Marcus said, in the novel, in addition to the gem dragon, metal dragon, and elemental dragon, there is also a kind of dragon called the sacred dragon. The invisible dragon is a kind of sacred dragon. It is transparent and no one can see its appearance. Wherever it goes, it brings endless disasters. Disasters? Then why is it called the sacred dragon? Because it can produce a very special gem. A special gem? Then it should be classified as a gem dragon. Right, what is a special gem? Does it have any different power? This gem is related to a legendary equipment. Sir, have you heard of the space ring? It is a small ring that can hold a lot of things. There are also space rings in this world. List searched the memory of his predecessor, but he had not heard of it. He said, no. Then are space rings real? Or, can the gems produced by the invisible dragon be used to make space rings? I don't know whether space rings exist or not. Even if they exist, they are priceless treasures that only true great aristocrats can possess. Marcus said, in the night novel I read, it indeed says that wherever the invisible dragon goes, apart from endless disasters, it will also leave behind the gems it produces. Whoever picks them up will have a space ring. And then there is nothing else. Is there no more information about the invisible dragon in the book? No, and I think it is just a fabricated story. You know, many of the novels that enlighten us about the glory of the night are blindly written by novelists. Marcus specially came to tell List this information, but obviously, he did not believe in the existence of the invisible dragon. List could not deny this and continued to ask, then, what about other sacred dragons? I don't know. Half of the book is missing. I only read a small part of the content. It only introduced the invisible dragon, a kind of sacred dragon. After Marcus left, List still did not understand. What was the meaning of the mission reward and information about the invisible dragon? Was it just to tell him about the invisible dragon through the mission? Or did it mean that there was an invisible dragon nearby that could be captured? Or was it to say that the invisible dragon was going to attack the flower town and should be prepared? Of course, it was also possible that the invisible dragon was going to deliver equipment, a space ring. While pondering, the smoke before his eyes reappeared. Mission completed. Reward: information about the invisible dragon. After a moment of distortion, a new mission was issued, Mission. Did the sudden appearance of wild corn in the wheat settlement attract your attention? Lord, you need to think about why wild corn grew in the wheat settlement. Perhaps there is more wild corn in the vicinity. Please find the origin of the wild corn. Reward. New information about the invisible dragon. Quickly, List's attention was focused on the new mission reward. Chapter 41. Looking at the problem calmly and objectively, List freed himself from his unrealistic fantasies about dragons. He felt that the so-called information about the invisible dragon might not be a good reward, according to his previous inference. First, the smoke mission seemed to be popularizing science. However, this did not make any sense. As a cheat, it should not be so boring. Second, there was an invisible dragon nearby that could be captured. If it was true, then it would definitely be explosive news. However, List did not have the strength to capture a dragon. Most of the countries with dragons started with young dragons as they could not withstand adult dragons. However, even if it was just a young dragon, the entire Coral Island would still not be able to defeat it with all the night. Third, the invisible dragon came from afar to deliver the equipment. List did not feel that his affinity with dragons was that good. Fourth, the invisible dragon was probably going to attack the flower town. The fourth inference was undoubtedly the most likely. Dragons attacking human villages and towns was no longer big news. Otherwise, the profession Dragon Slayer would not have arisen. In the major knight novels, the Dragon Slayer was a popular protagonist second only to the Dragon Knight. Basically, in a qualified knight novel, the protagonist would become a dragon knight or slay a dragon, and then marry a beautiful princess. Therefore, the rewards of these two missions tell me that I have to resist a dragon and strive to become the protagonist of a knight novel. The Dragon Slayer List? List looked in the mirror and chuckled. So, if the dragon dies, then where's the princess? List's mood was a bit complicated. He was worried that his speculation would come true, but he also felt that it was impossible. After thinking it over, he felt that there was no need to be groundless fears. He should first complete the missions and see what kind of clues the final reward would give before making a decision. If the invisible dragon really invaded and he could not resist it, then it did not mean that he could not ask for help. Once this information was sent to the Sapphire family, he believed that it should not be difficult to get the title of Marquis. This was the highest title that could be conferred in a principality. After calling Gort, he immediately handed over the mission. This corn grass will not suddenly appear. The seeds must have been blown over by birds or the wind. Teacher Gort, mobilize all the idle farmers to search between the settlements. We must find more corn grass. Gort did not quite understand the mission. List, is this corn grass very important? Of course, it's a kind of pasture with very high nutritional value. It's even more suitable than alfalfa as fodder for horse farms and dairy farms. No matter what, it's better to plant different kinds of pasture so that the livestock can grow faster. Since it's so valuable, I'll immediately arrange for people to search for it. I won't miss a single corner. Just as they were talking, List suddenly saw a group of people walking past the gate in an orderly manner outside the castle, heading south towards the Thorns Ridge. Teacher Gort, is that the new patrol team? Yes, your retainer knight has been a great help. At first, those bastards in the patrol team refused to obey the orders of an administrative officer like me, but after a few fights, they quickly restrained their temper. Well done. Discipline is the first priority of the patrol team. Teacher Gort, the management of the patrol team needs to continue to be strengthened. I have a few ideas that need to be implemented. The patrol team needs to take on the public security of the fief and the settlements. The fief will pay them. They also need to unify their uniforms and conduct themselves in a uniform manner. List outlined some general ideas. He intended to establish the patrol team as a police station. For the time being, they would only be responsible for public security. In the future, they would also be responsible for household registration. In this way, they could thoroughly understand everything about the fief. Anyone with a suspicious identity would not be able to gain a foothold in the flower town. However, there are only a few naldas in the fief. Isaiah has complained to me more than once that he can't do anything without a nalda. There were not many gold coins in List's castle. The butler had previously reported to him that there were still about 150 gold coins. However, the castle was currently very fat. Just List's red blood sword alone was worth 1 to 2,000 gold coins. There was also the annual profit from the black tulip industry, as well as the large amount of materials exchanged for assimilation. I will allocate 50 gold coins from the castle to maintain the fief's development. This portion of gold coins will be deducted from the fief's annual tax. 50 naldas? That is too much. List, I have looked it up. The fief's annual tax revenue is only a pitiful 15 naldas. 50 naldas is not much. Teacher Gort, tell Isaiah and Blair that the flower town will enter a busy period. They should be prepared. As you wish. List was not joking about the flower town's development. He had already started drawing a map of the fief. It was a very abstract and crude topographic map. Basically, the flower town was like a right-angled triangle. The two right-angled sides were the Thorns Ridge and the oblique side was the east coast. The fief was located in the center of the triangle. The castle was located near the right angle. The dairy farm and the barley settlement occupied the other two corners. If you want to get rich, you must first build a road. Holding a quill, he drew the dirt road from the Thorns Ridge to the fief. I need to build a gravel road for this main road. There is no cement, but there is a lot of sand. The east coast has a lot of sand, which can be used to pave the road. Then there was the mud road between the settlements, which could all be paved with sand. However, it was not a good choice to pave the road with sand alone. It was difficult to drain the accumulated water, and it would also pour into the shoes, leaving sand everywhere. Unfortunately, there were not many stones in the vicinity of the flower town, so it was impossible to mix sand with stone. As such, sand roads could only be built. It was more convenient than mud roads, which could not be used when it rained. Building roads was a big deal, and the other was farming. Sprites could influence the growth of crops, but they could not be relied on entirely. Previously, when there were no sprites in the flower town, the fief's farmers still had to farm. Scientific farming has only completed the first step, which is to let the subjects know to fertilize the crops. However, this is not enough. I still need to forge a batch of farming tools to increase the productivity of the farmers, so that more wasteland can be reclaimed to grow crops. I have exchanged for a pile of iron from Tulip Castle and Falcon Town, and I can contact the blacksmith shop. These two things were urgently needed, but the results could not be seen at the moment. However, there was another thing that could quickly bear fruit, gathering at the sea. On the back of Fiery Dragon, List gazed at the endless sea in front of him. The salty smell of the seawater assailed his nostrils. Waves splashed on the beach, reflecting the sunlight. For a moment, his eyes were filled with small stars. Thomas held Dosen's hand and let it play on the beach. Dosen developed very quickly. He could see it grow up almost every day. It was now the size of a rural dog. Perhaps it was because of the good food it ate, but there were already traces of magic power circulating on its body. It might not need to reach adulthood before it could release magic. List was ready to seize the opportunity to train it to prevent it from being too wild and hurting people. Sir, is there anything worth paying attention to on the east coast? There are no deep bays here, so it is not suitable for a dock. Marcus looked at the waves, still not feeling that there was anything valuable in the sea. Chapter 42. The tide is beginning to ebb, master. Thomas pulled Dosen and said to List, "Give Dosen to me. You, Tom, and Jesse will look for the seafood according to the method I told you." List took the rope from Dosen. Dosen still wanted to run outside to chase flowers. List suddenly shouted, "Quiet, Dosen!" Dosen did not listen. List dismounted from his horse, stretched out his hand, and pressed Dosen on the sand, making it unable to move. He loudly ordered, "Dosen, quiet!" Woo-woo. Dosen uttered two unknown sounds. Unable to struggle, it could only obediently lie down. Then List slowly let go. Trembling Woods struggled to move again and ran outside. List again pressed it down and ordered it to be quiet. After repeating this several times, Dosen finally stopped moving. At this time, the retainer knight Carl hurriedly handed over a piece of cured meat, which List rewarded to Dosen. Quiet, and you will have meat to eat. Dosen, do you understand? Oh. Dosen crazily tore at the cured meat and wolfed it down. Before it went out, List specifically told Thomas not to feed it. Only hunger could make an animal have a deep memory, better form a conditioned reflex, and achieve obedience training. Sir, you have a talent for World of Warcraft taming. I can foresee that, in the future, Dosen will be a qualified domesticated World of Warcraft. Of course, if it cannot do it, I will slaughter it halfway. Last night, the Flying Dust Dog's smoked meat tasted very good. Even in Longtaro Castle, I have only eaten World of Warcraft meat a few times. The meat of the large Flying Dust Dog was not sold. It was left in the castle to be marinated and air-dried. It is indeed a delicacy. When I eat it, I can feel the magic power nourishing my body. Marcus had also eaten in the castle last night. After training Dosen for a while, List handed Dosen over to Carl. He rowed to the shore after the tide had ebbed to see how the serving men were doing. At this time, the 3 male servants, Thomas, Tom, and Jesse, each wore a pair of thick leather gloves. They carried buckets, hammers, and shovels, and were constantly busy. Thomas was in charge of turning over the rocks and looking for seafood above and below the rocks. Jesse was responsible for shoveling the sand and looking for seafood under the sand. Tom, on the other hand, was in charge of picking up all kinds of seafood that could not be returned to the sea in time and were forced to be stranded. Teacher Marcus, do you know the relationship between the ebb and flow of the tide and the moon at night? List was in a good mood and asked a question. Marcus shook his head. I don't know. The moon is constantly moving. It attracts the seawater, the ebb and flow of the tide. Of course, the sun also attracts it, but the sun is much farther away and not as attractive as the moon. I don't understand what you know at all, my lord. Marcus was already being polite. The moon and the sun attract seawater. If it were someone else, he would have spat in their face. Don't talk about eggs. Then he would have retorted that you say the moon and sun attract seawater. Why don't you suck us humans into the sky so that everyone can fly and be Sky Knight? Don't lie to me that I'm not well educated. Seeing Marcus's expression, List felt bored, ignorant natives. After a moment of lamentation, he thought to himself, since the moon here can also cause tides, does that mean that this world is indeed a planet? If he sailed along the Azure Waves Sea, would he be able to circle around the planet and return to this place? If that's true, maybe one day I can send a fleet to sail around the world? This idea was a bit distant, and List did not continue to think about it. He rode his horse to Tom's side. Tom hurriedly saluted. My lord! You do your thing, I'm just looking. At a glance, he saw that Tom's bucket was filled with clams, conches, starfish, crabs, sea rainbows, clams, and seaweed, as well as some insects like sea centipedes and sea cockroaches. However, sea cockroaches and sea centipedes could run and accidentally fall out of the bucket, so Tom had to clumsily pick them up again. These 2 kinds of insects that can run are not seafood, you can throw them away. List reminded. Oh yes, yes, my lord. Tom hurriedly threw the insects away again. He didn't know if it was because the lord was around, but he kept trying to catch them but couldn't, and he was sweating profusely. Not far away, Thomas, who was moving the rocks, saw Tom's bewildered look, turned his head and smiled proudly. Among the 3 serving men of the castle, only he was good enough to be the suitable successor to the butler. Because on the other side, Jesse, who was digging for a long time, didn't catch any of the razor clams and mantis shrimps that the lord had instructed him to. He dug randomly, not knowing that he had to dig through the small holes of the seafood. What a waste, he thought in his heart. So he happily took the hammer and hammered under the rocks, knocking down clams, sea rainbows, and oysters one by one. Occasionally, he could also pick up a few small crabs. Oysters need to scoop out their flesh just like this. Thomas smashed the shell of the oyster with a hammer and dug out the soft flesh inside. Before leaving, The Sir Lord had said that oyster flesh was delicious. Thomas did not think that this kind of ugly and soft thing was delicious, but he would meticulously complete the Sir Lord's instructions. It was effortless. The exposed rocks after the ebb were full of oysters, sea rainbows and the like. In just 2 hours, Thomas had filled up the 2 buckets he had brought. One of the buckets was filled with meat from the oysters. He looked at Tom again. Although the bucket was full, the Sir Lord had told him several times not to pick up some things, but he still went to pick them up. It was clearly the same kind of insect, but he thought it was different. He was so stupid. As for Jesse, he could be ignored. He dug until he was covered in sweat, and the bucket had just reached the bottom. There were a few fat shrimps. The Sir Lord said they were mantis shrimps, and a few stick-like razor clams, which seemed to be called bamboo razor clams. He put down his bucket full of oyster flesh, puffed out his chest, and waited for the Sir Lord's inspection. List, who had spent most of his time under the coconut tree on horseback, saw that it was almost noon and the sun was already as hot as fire, so he stopped the beachcombing experiment. He rode over and looked at each bucket. Tom, you have to work harder to distinguish between pests and seafood. Not everything on the beach can be eaten. If it is poisonous, it will poison people. Tom lowered his head in shame. I'm sorry, Master. I'm too stupid to distinguish. It doesn't matter, Tom. It's your first time combing the sea, so it's normal to be inexperienced. Don't feel guilty about it. List comforted him, then turned to Jesse's bucket. Well, Jesse, I can see your diligence, but it's obvious that you haven't applied the method I taught you. Master, I dug hard, but I kept digging and digging, and the hole disappeared. Jesse said in a panic, You need to dig in the direction of the hole. I can continue to stay here and dig, Master. I can definitely dig until the bucket is full. If you stay here, no one in the castle will dive. Jesse, I don't mean to blame you. Digging mantis shrimp and razor clams is not easy in itself. Finally, List walked in front of Thomas's buckets. One bucket was full of oyster flesh, and the other was full of crabs, sea rainbows, and so on. Well done, Thomas. Thank you for the compliment, Master. This is what I should do. I will do my best to do things for Master. Thomas beamed with joy. List responded with an aristocratic smile, expressing his approval of Thomas. Of course, he knew what Thomas was thinking. Butler Carter had already told him that Thomas was ambitious. But as the Lord, he did not care, because no matter how ambitious Thomas was, he only wanted to be the castle's butler. If he really had the ability, old Carter would not be able to do it. So what if Thomas was the butler? Chapter 43. After returning to the castle with a bunch of seafood, List didn't immediately let the kitchen cook them. These seafood were indeed similar to the seafood in his memory, but whether it was edible or poisonous, he needed to verify it. The verification was very simple. Marcus took the few hunters in the town to the periphery of the Thorns Ridge to set traps and capture several wolves, wild cats, and other carnivorous beasts. The wolves, wild cats, and other beasts in the cages were hungry. The seafood was thrown in and was immediately gobbled up by the beasts. The cooked seafood was then given to another group of beasts. After waiting for a day, the next day, except for 2 beasts that died after eating some sea urchins, the other beasts were still alive and kicking, showing no signs of poisoning. This shows that the seafood at the seaside is actually similar to the seafood on Earth, except for the sea urchins. Then remove the sea urchins and have the remaining edible seafood made into specimens for the farmers to compare. After thinking about it, List wasn't in a hurry to have people gather seafood. He needed to let others understand that seafood was delicious and not something that tasted bad. Many seafood could be eaten raw, but List didn't recommend it. He felt that eating too much seafood would easily cause one to be infected by the parasites inside. Without medical conditions, being infected with parasites could only wait for death. Therefore, he called over the cook, Abby Ladle. Mrs. Abby, let me tell you how to cook seafood. Do you see this crab? Brush it clean with a brush and steam it. This mantis shrimp, brush it clean and boil it in plain water. Look at this clam. You can use it to make soup or stir-fry it. Also, this oyster meat can be eaten raw, but I don't eat raw seafood. You need to boil it or stir-fry it. We have a lot of oyster meat here. I call it oyster. If you can't eat it, you can dry it and boil it to get oil. Oyster, scientific name oyster, also called oyster, was a kind of shellfish. It was a precious ingredient. In his hometown, Liszt liked to eat oyster very much because oyster was rich in zinc. Zinc had an important impact on the development of secondary sexual characteristics. If there was a trace of zinc in the blood, one would be full of vigor. Therefore, oysters would definitely become an indispensable delicacy on Baron's dining table. Fortunately, the flower town was bordered by the sea and had not been overharvested. The sea was densely packed with oysters, so there was no need to worry about a lack of zinc. The 16-year-old Liszt was still in the period of rapid development. He could only become stronger by eating more. After teaching Abby Ladle how to cook seafood, Liszt was not looking forward to eating seafood for the first time in this world. In fact, he had already eaten it. In Long Taro Castle, fishermen had picked up rock lobsters from the sea. As an archipelago country, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had many fishermen. Naturally, some of the serfs would go to the sea to beg for food and discover the delicious seafood. It was just that transportation was inconvenient and information was blocked, so it was impossible to spread the seafood recipes of the various islands. On the Coral Island, the Tulip family had not finished reclaiming the wasteland and had no motivation to open up the sea. Therefore, the subjects of Flower Town had never thought of catching seafood for more than a decade or two. This is Mrs. Abby's first time cooking seafood. I'm afraid that she can't even steam the crabs well. I can only let her continue to explore how to cook the best and slowly improve her cooking skills. Sure enough, at noon, at the castle's dining table, Liszt ate the familiar seafood, but he could not find the familiar taste. The crabs were steamed too hard, the mantis shrimp were boiled too soft, the oysters were stir-fried too hard, and the clam soup was full of sand. However, he still ate a lot with relish. It was much more delicious than the bread and barbecue he usually ate. Marcus, Gort, Isaiah, and Blair accompanied Liszt to eat the seafood banquet. Delicious! Marcus gave a simple evaluation and then buried his head in the mantis shrimp and crab. Isaiah smiled. Delicious! Blair gave a thumbs up. A rare delicacy. Gort was the most exaggerated. At first, he disliked the ugly appearance of the oyster meat and could not eat it. But when he tasted the taste, he could not stop. The plate in front of him was swept clean and he ordered 2 more. He drank a mouthful of hops beer and ate a piece of oyster. His wrinkled face was full of happiness. I remember. What do you remember? Liszt skillfully opened the shell of the crab. When I was young, I traveled to an island called Flying Fish Island. In the islanders' homes, I ate this oyster. At that time, I was drunk, ate a lot of oysters, and had a wonderful night. After I sobered up and left Flying Fish Island, I never found that delicacy again. I did not expect to find it again now. Then eat more. Maybe something wonderful will happen tonight. Liszt smiled faintly. He already knew that Gort had found a young girl in town. The young girl was only 16 or 17 years old. If the other party had not voluntarily followed Gort, Liszt would definitely have stopped this behavior of an old cow eating young grass. Gort laughed. Who knows? In any case, I've already fallen in love with oysters. Isaiah and Blair gave a tacit laugh. They were all adults and understood the meaning behind their words. Even Marcus had an expectant expression in his eyes. He turned his head and began to eat the oyster. In the living room upstairs, the nobles and knight were happily enjoying the delicious seafood. In the kitchen downstairs, the servants were also enjoying the happiness brought about by the seafood. This mantis shrimp is really delicious. If I did not eat it myself, who would have thought that such an ugly bug would be so delicious? Irene Four Fingers ate heartily. Abby said with dissatisfaction, Little girl, don't eat so crudely. You're just like a boy. I'm just a kitchen maid. Why can't I eat like this? I used to eat like this at home. Even Mr. Carter did not scold me. Carter elegantly cut the oyster. As a butler, He always strived to conform to the temperament of a noble butler, including eating. He also asked the other servants to try to be as close to noble etiquette as possible. Hearing this, he said, "Irene, you've seen Miss Li Weiwei's personal maid. Maybe you should learn how she eats." "I don't want to learn from her. Pinching her fingers and cutting a knife. If I didn't know better, I would think that she was a noble lady." Even the master praised Big Sister Maggie's manners, but Big Sister Maggie doesn't eat like that. Maggie said with a smile, "I grew up in the village, but no one taught me how to eat elegantly. However, I'm learning from Mrs. Morrison. She worked in Tulip Castle before. The maids there know more about noble etiquette than many noble ladies." Moss and Patty pinched the mantis shrimp's head and squeezed out the meat. "That's because nobles have the right to break the rules. We servants must strictly follow them, otherwise we will face harsh punishment." Irene suddenly shouted, "The master will not punish the servants. Tom broke the castle's vase yesterday, but the master did not scold him. The master is benevolent. I will definitely not break things next time." Tom had a respectful expression on his face. Chapter 44. The banquet was over. List got down to business. "I am going to build a new settlement on the east coast to house some serfs as fishermen." The farmers were very busy during the planting season, but after planting the crops, they would become very idle. List felt that this was an unreasonable allocation of human resources. It would be better to free up a part of the farmers and focus on developing the offshore fishery, the coastal fishery. Now that there were no ships, even if they wanted to go fishing, it would be impossible. Such delicacies should indeed be harvested more. However, List, the fief's population is too small. We don't even have 2,000 people. The settlement's agricultural production cannot be separated from the serfs' labor force. I will think of a way to increase the population. List didn't say much. In fact, he had already discussed with Levis that he would purchase serfs from Levis in exchange for a share of the Black Tulip. The Count's fleet would go out to sea to trade, so it could carry a lot of serfs when it returned. These serfs might come from war-torn islands or the continent. Gort seemed to understand. "Since you said so, then I will immediately start planning for the new settlement." "Sir Baron, what is the name of the new settlement?" asked Isaiah. "Let's call it the Oyster Settlement." List had great expectations for the Oyster Settlement. He hoped that after the settlement was built, a group of serfs would be converted into fishermen who would continuously fish for seafood, provide food for the flower town, and provide a material foundation for the future construction. Every winter, the flower town subjects would hide at home and sleep to reduce food consumption. With food, the cold of winter was nothing. A lot of construction could start in winter. In the evening, Gort came to the castle again. "List, the corn grass was found." The patrol finally did something serious. They found a batch of corn grass at the edge of the Thorns Ridge in the southwest corner of the fief. "Take me to see it." Before the sky turned dark, List saw with his own eyes a large area of corn grass, mixed with other weeds. Compared to the 3 wild corn plants in the wheat settlement, these corn grasses were much shorter, probably due to malnutrition. List turned around and felt a little disappointed. This was probably the origin of corn grass, but there were no signs of sprite worms being bred. Without sprite worms, it would be very difficult for corn grass to develop. Moreover, with the help of sprite worms, it was impossible to gradually improve the breed and get closer to the corn cob. "Keep an eye on them. You must collect the seeds well. When we return to the town, choose a suitable place to plant a batch of them in the fields. This will provide a new breed of pasture for the horse farm and dairy farm." At night, after taking a shower, List was reading in his study. Smoke serpentines condensed before his eyes. Mission completed. Rewarded with new information on the invisible dragon. In a flash, the smoke distorted and a new mission was issued. Mission: the fishing industry has been put on the Lord's agenda. A group of serfs will soon be driven into the sea by you. Commanding subjects was a necessary skill for a lord, but sustainable development was more important. Please upgrade the equipment of the fishermen. Reward: A large patch of smoke grass. A big patch of smoked grass. What is that? Tobacco? Upgrading the fisherman's equipment was a very simple task. Even if the smoke mission had not been issued, he would still have done it. There were no tools for fishing, and he could not let the fishermen use their hands. The rocks after the tide had receded were very sharp, and if one was not careful, they could cut their fingers. The mission reward was no longer information on the invisible dragon, which made List feel somewhat relieved. Bing began to look forward to what the smoke grass was. Smoking was popular among the aristocrats. The Tulip family had planted a lot of tobacco and even had a tobacco lesser sprite. Therefore, the smoke grass should not be tobacco. There are tobacco seeds among the seeds traded from Tulip Castle. If I want to plant them, I can plant them at any time. List no longer worried about it. Sooner or later, he would know what the smoke grass was. He waved his hand to disperse the smoke serpentines and continued to read. The Count honored his words. When List returned, he sent him a carriage full of books. At present, he was reading an autobiographical novel called Earth Ranger Griff's Travels. From a first-person point of view, the book introduced the experiences of an Earth Knight named Griff, who traveled through the Grand Duchy of Maple Leaf. The story was very interesting, although a lot of the content, in List's view, was purely obscene, such as having an affair with the Countess, eloping with the young Miss Marchioness, and chatting merrily and wittily with the Grand Duke of Maple Leaf. This was not the treatment that a descendant of a fallen aristocrat, who was not even a Lord Knight, could enjoy. However, the author of the book was certainly a person with rich experience. He introduced a lot of customs and practices that were very different from Coral Island, as well as the decadent lives of some aristocrats and many hearsay stories. Very interesting. List liked this kind of novel, where he could read the story and gain knowledge. While he was reading, the story suddenly jumped to a dragon-slaying battle, in which Griff traveled to a small town that was being invaded by an invisible creature. The lord of the small town had fled, and the people were powerless to resist. At this time, Griff decided to save the suffering people. After observing it, he concluded that it was an invisible dragon. However, the book did not mention how he observed it and came to this conclusion. The invisible dragon is a mystical dragon hidden in another world. Only the most courageous and upright knight can see it. I am not courageous enough. If I want to see it, I have to summon my courage. I have to find it, face it, and find its weakness. Griff thus succeeded in courting death. He arrived in front of the invisible dragon and was beaten to the point of vomiting blood by the invisible dragon. But because of this, he saw the invisible dragon. Ah, what a beautiful dragon it is! It is like a flowing crystal, colorless and transparent all over. I vomited blood, and the blood actually passed through its body. Yes, I can't touch it. I am very depressed, because I may never be able to ride it. List admired Griff's tenacity. He was about to be beaten to death by the invisible dragon, yet he still regretted not being able to ride the dragon. Fortunately, Griff was self-aware. I knew it wanted to kill me. I couldn't see its eyes and could only see a vague mass of water, but I knew it wanted to kill me. I could feel its mood. I had already forgotten about life and death. I just wanted to smoke a cigarette or two at the last moment. Oh, sorry, I don't have any tobacco. I had to randomly grab a handful of grass next to me and chew it to resist my addiction. Reading up to this point, List raised his eyebrows. He continued to read. Later, I learned that the grass I grabbed is called smoke grass. It is a grass very similar to tobacco, but its taste is unique, just like the socks I wore for 16 or 26 days without washing. I was about to vomit. Yes, at that moment I successfully quit smoking. I swore that I would never smoke again. I was addicted to smoking for 17 years. When I was a child, my father liked to smoke the tobacco he rolled himself. He would ask me, "Hey Griff, do you smoke?" The latter part of the book was about his father teaching him how to smoke. Chapter 45. Fortunately, after more than 500 words of reminiscence, Griff finally returned to the dragon-slaying storyline. I must assure you that I sincerely vowed to quit smoking, but I later forgot because I was shocked by the invisible dragon's actions. Heavens, it actually snatched the smoke grass from my hand and ate it. I think it must have not taken a bath for many years and had a misconception about the taste. Sorry for speaking ill of the invisible dragon. In fact, we later became friends. Because it ate my smoke grass, it did not kill me, and I succeeded in exchanging a bundle of smoke grass and 2 cows for the invisible dragon's friendship. Frankly speaking, the invisible dragon is not big, only a little bigger than a house. I have seen the Maple Leaf Grand Duke's bronze dragon. It is a beautiful metal dragon nearly 30 meters long. The invisible dragon is like its child. Oh, dragons don't have children. We had a pleasant afternoon together. In the evening, it came to me, shook its body, and then a gem fell into my hand. It flew away, but it left behind its gem. A gem the size of a fingernail. Since then, I have always worn it on my finger. Haha. Now you know where my space ring came from. Countless noble knights were willing to pay everything in exchange for this ring, but I will not exchange it, because it is a testimony of the friendship between me and the invisible dragon. At this point, the invisible dragon chapter came to an end. Griff quickly moved on to the next story, the Battle of Wits with the Headless Knight. After List quickly flipped through the roughly 50,000 words novel, there was no more information about the invisible dragon. Even the space ring only made an appearance once. It was as if Griff had just remembered to write about the invisible dragon, and then forgot everything after writing. It seems that the reward this time is the knowledge about the invisible dragon recorded in Earth Ranger Griff's travels. Only brave and upright people can see the invisible dragon. In that case, I reckon that there is no possibility of seeing it. It is neither brave nor upright. He was very self-aware. However, he seriously doubted the authenticity of this information. How could it be possible to rely on such intangible, unseen, and inexplicable characters to decide whether to see the invisible dragon or not? This story feels like a reenactment of Only Pure Maidens Can Meet Unicorns. Many of the female protagonists in knight novels were the daughters of nobles who rode on unicorns. List had read a few of them, and all of them swore that only pure, beautiful, innocent, and kind virgins could be accepted by unicorns. As for the existence of a legendary creature like the unicorn, List expressed his doubts. He had doubts about the unicorn and also about the invisible dragon. In particular, only a brave and upright knight could see the invisible dragon. He quickly captured useful information. Griff used smokegrass to resist the invisible dragon's slaughter. Later, he said that he used a bundle of grass and 2 cows to exchange for the invisible dragon's gem. My current smoke mission rewards smokegrass. It seems that this is also part of a chain mission. The first reward was information on the invisible dragon. Next was the new information about the invisible dragon. Now the reward was smokegrass, which the invisible dragon loved to eat. All of the rewards were related, as if a large-scale chain mission had been unlocked. Therefore, the mission's objective was very easy to infer. There might really be an invisible dragon that was going to invade the flower town. Cows? List thought of another link. The dairy farm seems to have 2 old cows that cannot produce milk. However, the castle has plenty of food and has not used them to entertain guests. Perhaps these 2 old cows are the dinner I need to prepare for the invisible dragon? The information was still not clear enough, and the preparations were still not sufficient. List felt that the urgent matter at hand was to continue with the mission and get more details about the invisible dragon chain mission so that he could formulate a response strategy. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Please come in. The butler old Carter walked in with an oil lamp in hand. Master, it is already late, you should rest early. I am about to go to bed. List closed the book and put it back on the bookshelf. He frowned slightly because of the unpleasant smell on his hands. Mr. Carter, while you are at it, light up a box of air freshener in the study. I really can't stand the strange smell of this thick bast paper. This time, the carriage of books gifted by the Count carried a large amount of stench. Although List had already lit the air freshener, it still could not cover up the stench. There was no such thing as clean and snow-white paper. There was only thick bast paper that had turned yellow and carried a lingering stench. This kind of paper was made from the inner layer of animal leather, which was peeled off and specially tanned. The production cost was very high, but it was not easy to preserve and it was not convenient to write on. Liszt really wanted to produce white paper as soon as possible to replace this thick bast paper. However, he also understood that now was not the right time. First, white paper was not urgently needed. Second, there was no copyright law. Greater aristocrats could snatch the paper-making technology at any time. Just as he had not set about researching horseshoes, saddles, or cement, he still had the general structure of a schooner in his mind. Once invented, it would definitely promote the development of the age of navigation. In fact, the most important thing was that there was no one. The entire town had a total of 1991 people. Recently, 2 elderly people had died in the town, giving birth to 4 newborns, one of which had died. Of these 1991 people, apart from the elderly and children who had no labor force, it was already very rare for there to be 1,500 people working. They had to farm, build roads, and now they had to build an oyster settlement. Soon, they had to send out a group of people to sew gloves, cast hammers and shovels, and produce fishing equipment for the fishermen. As for Liszt himself, he was also very busy. He had to practice unceasingly. He had already grasped the fiery dragon drill and fire surge fluctuations, but he needed time to master them. After obtaining the red blood sword, he became even more diligent in his cultivation, hoping that he could break through the shackles of the earth and soar into the sky. Carter lit the air freshener and blew out a candle. He blew out a candle and said, "Master, shouldn't the castle hire a few more servants? Is there not enough manpower?" Liszt was a little surprised. 10 servants should be enough to serve him alone. Carter solemnly said, "The wheat sprite, peanut sprite, tulip sprite, and alfalfa sprite are all good babies. But their worm stalks need to be patrolled and taken care of by male servants every day. This work is arranged for Jessie. Now the corn has also begun to be planted, and the thorn sprite worm also needs to be settled. Jessie is too busy." After a pause, he continued, "Dosen, Black Dragon, Fiery Dragon, and several other horses all need to be taken care of. Before the oyster settlement is built, the castle's seafood has to be collected by the servants. There is also the kitchen. With the increasing number of dishes, Mrs. Abbey is already complaining that she is unable to split herself. The castle, the city, and the town overlapped in many ways. However, the castle was more inclined towards self-cultivation, while the town governed the entire territory and collected taxes. Liszt was not satisfied with this system, feeling that it hindered the development of productivity. The biggest obstacle was the castle. It was a twisted monster that controlled all the sprites and firmly bound the greatest productivity. After all, the biggest role of the castle was to provide the aristocracy with a luxurious life, not to liberate productivity. He understood this point, but he didn't have many thoughts of changing it. After all, he was an aristocrat. "Since there is not enough manpower, Mr. Carter, you will be responsible for recruiting new servants." Chapter 46. Big Lily. Where is little Lily? What's the matter, old Abel? Little Lily is feeding the chickens in the yard. Big Jasmine was a middle-aged woman with a stooped back from years of hard work. A bright smile appeared on old Abel's wrinkled face. "It's good news. Sir Lord's castle is recruiting new servants. I heard from Mr. Butler Carter that he wants to recruit 3 serving men, a maid, and a kitchen maid. Big Lily, little Lily can apply for the position of maid." "Really? Sir Lord really wants to recruit a new maid? Is this true? That's great." Big Lily ran into the house. "I'm going to tell little Lily. Hurry up, hurry up." By the time old Abel finished speaking, Big Jasmine had already disappeared. He shook his head with a smile and muttered, "I have to go back and tell everyone the good news. In the castle, they can drink milk every day. What a wonderful life. The children are blessed." Soon, all 48 serfs in the barley settlement learned of the news. "This is really good news. I was complaining that Malfoy had no more fields to farm and could only open up wastelands. He is strong, diligent, and capable. Apart from eating a lot, he can definitely do a good job as a serving man. That's not necessarily true. Parker is more diligent and polite. I think he will definitely be able to apply. Is the news true? Sir Lord will recruit servants from the countryside? It was old Abel who said it. He has been forging tools for Sir Lord in the blacksmith shop for the past few days. How could his words be false? Old Abel has good craftsmanship, but can he still lift the hammer? He doesn't need to do it himself. Sir Lord will arrange for an apprentice to hit the hammer. Remember the lame Peter? He went to the blacksmith shop to be an apprentice. Sir Lord pays him a copper coin a day. Isn't the blacksmith shop owned by the old drunkard? The old drunkard has long sold the blacksmith shop to Sir Lord. Ho ho, he sold it for 3 naldas. 3 naldas. My God. Sir Lord is so generous. Good news was always like a bird with wings, quickly flying past everyone's ears. Little Lily, who was feeding the chickens in the yard, was so excited that her face turned red. Mom, can I really apply to be a maid? Old Abel brought the news. He wouldn't lie. Little Lily, you need to prepare well. As long as you can enter the castle, you will be able to live a good life. Big Lily said with joy. But, will Sir Lord choose me? Have some confidence in yourself, little Lily. You're the most outstanding girl in the Barley settlement. You're hardworking and capable. You're my pride. Of course, you can take a step back. Sir Lord wants to recruit a maid and a kitchen maid. You can apply for the position of a kitchen maid. You're the cleanest in washing vegetables. Yes, I know what to do, Mom. Little Lily's eyes flashed with determination. In order to have a good life in the future, she must show enough excellence to apply to be a maid in the castle. Without a father, her mother had to support her and her 2 younger brothers. Their lives were very poor. She had already grown up and had to share the burden of the family. The 17-year-old girl secretly clenched her fists. In the blacksmith shop, List watched several old blacksmiths and apprentices busily forge iron ingots. List took out the iron ingots he obtained from the black tulip assimilation trade and used them to forge farming tools. The first to forge was the fisherman's equipment: shovels, hammers, and awls. With these 3 kinds of equipment, the fisherman could harvest seafood. The seafood resources on the Flower Town's east coast had not been exploited, nor had they suffered any pollution. The abundant shellfish and crabs could be easily caught without much skill. Teacher Gort, has the selection of the fishermen started? List took the handkerchief handed over by Marcus and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He was already accustomed to being served by a valet. As long as there was no physical contact, it was still very enjoyable to have someone serve him tea. Gort could only take out his handkerchief and wipe his sweat. Your request has been conveyed. The clerks are doing publicity in each settlement. The fishermen only accept the elderly, women, and some children who have not yet grown up. That's right. Gathering the sea does not require too much physical strength. It only requires patience. It is a reasonable allocation of human resources to let the farmers who are not very efficient in farming gather the sea. However, you must do a good job in publicizing that poisoned seafood cannot be touched and raw seafood cannot be eaten. The medical and hygienic means of this world were extremely underdeveloped. Aristocrats cultivated qi and rarely got sick, so they had no motivation to study medicine. List also did not understand medicine. All he could do was to make his subjects focus on prevention, hygiene, drinking boiled water, and eating cooked food. It is their luck to have met you, List. You have a unique charm. Gort flattered. Ordinary young aristocrats would probably become complacent after being flattered a few words. List had the soul of an adult and his 3 views had long been mature. It was impossible for him to be blinded by a few words. He just instructed, do not stop the forging of ironware, but do not let the blacksmiths tire themselves out. Adjust their wages from 5 copper coins to 6 copper coins, and the apprentices to 2 copper coins. Apprentices who did odd jobs were paid 1 copper coin a day. Masters who handled hammers were paid 5 copper coins a day. This was the wage that Liszt had previously offered. Relatively speaking, it was quite high. Nowadays, the rich and overbearing baron disdained exploiting the commoners for a few copper coins. It should be noted that the red blood sword at his waist was worth 1 or 2,000 gold coins. That was more than 100,000 silver coins, or more than 10 million copper coins. Besides, the entire flower town was his. His subjects being rich was no different from him being rich. He could adjust the tax rate at will and collect taxes however he wanted. 6 copper coins a day. Oh, what a lucky blacksmith, Gort muttered. Then he walked into the blacksmith's forging room and shouted, "Mr. Blacksmiths, Sir Lord has just decided to increase your wages from 5 copper coins a day to 6 copper coins a day. Apprentices can also get 2 copper coins a day. Work hard. Sir Lord's generosity is not something you can imagine." Wow! 6 copper coins a day. Long live Sir Lord. Praise Sir Lord. Old Jack will forge ironware for Sir Lord for the rest of his life. Apprentices can also get 2 copper coins a day. Heavens, my mom and dad will be so happy. The smithy was filled with laughter and the complaints about the stuffy heat dissipated. Everyone was working hard to repay the generous Sir Lord Liszt. Hearing the cheers inside, Liszt shook his head. He might be benevolent and unwilling to squeeze the serf class, but he also used a little profit to drive the serf's production efficiency. Compared to squeezing, he preferred to create, rationally allocate production resources, and vigorously improve work efficiency, so as to make perfect use of the town's population of less than 2,000. "Master, are you going back?" Chapter 47. Lily Bathtub, Wendy Big Toe, Jim Cow Dung, Parker Red Nose, John Doorknob. After selection, the 5 of you will be given the opportunity to work in the castle. After 3 consecutive days of training, Butler Carter finally announced the 3 men and 2 women who met his criteria to be the castle's new serving men and maids. The remaining 7 or 8 trainees asked unwillingly, "Mr. Carter, please give me another chance. I will definitely do better." "I'm sorry, once the decision is made, it cannot be changed. But you don't have to be nervous. During these 3 days of training, each of you will be paid 3 copper coins according to the standard of a kitchen maid. And your excellence has already been engraved in my mind. If the castle needs to recruit servants next time, I will definitely consider you first." Strictly speaking, the castle's servants were owned by Liszt. But it wasn't like he was driving the servants for free, he still had to pay for them. The servants could save their own money, buy food, drink, and clothes, and also send it home. The castle's salary was 1 copper coin a day for the kitchen maid and assistant serving men, 2 copper coins a day for the maid and serving men, 3 copper coins a day for the first serving men and cook, and 4 copper coins a day for the butler and the housekeeper. Except for Carter and Mawson, the other servants in the castle chose to send money home to supplement their family expenses. Moreover, once the servants got tired of working, they could apply for a buyout, which was to return to freedom. Of course, the decision was in the hands of the nobles whether to agree to the buyout or not. The young men and women who were screened out left the castle in disappointment. For them, losing the opportunity to work in the beautiful castle was a major blow. The 5 who were chosen couldn't contain their excitement. "Heavens! I've been chosen. Did I stay in the castle? Mom, I did it." Carter smiled as he looked at the 5 newcomers, recalling his youth. From a poor serf family, he was chosen by the castle of a viscount family and became a servant. Starting from the lowest assistant serving man, he gradually became an excellent servant, and the Tulip family also ushered in leaps and bounds. He was sent by the count to manage the family's other castles in other towns. When Liszt came of age, he followed him and became a housekeeper. Time had left heavy traces on his face. He could barely remember how happy he was when he became a servant. For the past few decades, he had been working in the castle. His relatives had passed away many years ago. There were regrets, but there were also blessings. Now, her greatest wish was to be by Liszt's side. When the day came that the sun no longer rose, she would choose to sleep forever. "Young ladies and gentlemen, please be quiet," He stretched out his hand and gestured for the newcomers to not be too excited. Next, I will announce your job positions. Lily and the others quickly quietened down. Lily Bathtub, Mrs. Abby admires you very much. You work as a kitchen maid. Ms. Irene will take you to familiarize you for a while and help Mrs. Abby as soon as possible. Little Lily immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. I will familiarize myself with the kitchen as soon as possible. That's good. But don't put too much pressure on yourself. Mrs. Abby is outspoken, but once you get familiar with her, you will know that she is a good person. Carter was a little worried for the little girl. He didn't know if she could bear Abby Ladle's loud voice and hairdryer. He continued to announce, Wendy Big Toe, Mrs. Morrison will take you to familiarize yourself with what a maid needs to do. Yes, Mr. Carter. Then Jim Cowdung, Parker Rednose, and John Doorknob. Carter looked at the three young men with emaciated faces. Mr. Carter. The three straightened their chests, trying to make themselves look elegant. Carter was satisfied with their attitude. Compared with a thorn like Thomas, the obedient young men were more in line with his wishes. In the next few days, I will take you to familiarize yourself with the work of a servant as soon as possible. Soon you will be busy not only in the castle but also outside the castle. He looked up at each new servant. You are not only yourselves, but also the image of the castle. You must dress appropriately and behave in a civilized manner. You must become familiar with aristocratic etiquette as soon as possible. You must completely say goodbye to the lazy appearance of the serfs in the past. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? Understood, Mr. Carter. Then, each of you will have half a day off. Go back and share the good news with your families. Starting tomorrow, you will live in the castle. Mr. Carter, congratulations. You are about to become a butler. After the new servants impatiently returned home to report the good news, Mrs. Morrison chatted with Carter. Well, this feeling is good. Carter showed a rare playful smile. I have to live a little longer to prevent Thomas from taking over. I don't want to see him enjoy this feeling. I think Thomas is more willing to stay by Master's side. He is indeed smarter than Tom and Jesse. Carter said with a hint of mystery. Master inherited the courage of the Tulip family and the shrewdness of the Taro family. Sometimes, being a little stupid in front of Master might be better than being a little smarter. At this point, he suddenly listened attentively and then said, The sound of hooves, Master has returned. I am going to greet Master. Go ahead, the stupid and smart butler Carter. Carter tilted his neck. He had already formed a tacit understanding with M.O. Senator. Only two butlers with tacit understanding could take care of the castle in an orderly manner. Walking to the door, the tall and handsome List riding on the back of Fire Dragon galloped over with the sun on his back. The golden light sprinkled on his light blonde, slightly curly hair, as if countless gold were flowing. Master is like a natural aristocrat. He has all the temperament of an aristocrat. Carter thought. He bowed slightly. Welcome home, Master. Mr. Carter, have you chosen a new servant? List handed the reins to Thomas and untied the bow tie around his neck. Summer was coming, and the aristocratic clothes were a little stuffy. He didn't like this kind of attire. The aristocratic clothes of the Grand Duchy were the style of the continent. Female aristocrats mainly wore long skirts with a skirt inside and cushions on their buttocks, so that the whole long skirt could be supported like a pyramid. Li Weiwei never wore this kind of clothes. She liked to wear male aristocratic clothes. The full set of male aristocratic clothes was called frack Abbey. It consisted of a coat shaped like a tuxedo, frack, a small vest worn inside, killet, and a pair of tight trousers, batet. Of course, it also had to be paired with boots and stockings. Another thing was that male aristocrats needed to be adorned with clothing that symbolized aristocratic authority around their necks. Bow ties could be worn at ordinary home. When going out for business, they needed to wear a neck-like cravat, which List called a neckerchief. During grand ceremonies, they needed to wear raff, which was a large disc around the neck, which List called a pleated collar. Chapter 48. Ties, shirts, vests, boxers, suits, trousers, gentlemen's hats, leather shoes. Liszt had a series of clothes he wanted to produce. But he couldn't be so unconventional. After all, he was just a country baron. If one day he became the king of a country, he could reform at will and lead the trend. Now he could only endure the cumbersome clothing to maintain the so-called aristocratic decency. Master, I gave the servants half a day off. Starting tomorrow, they will work wholeheartedly for the castle. Well, you see to it. Yes. Liszt, who was sweating from the heat, had little interest in chatting. Mr. Carter, have someone prepare bathing water for me. This weather is not very friendly to people. As you wish. Carter hurriedly told the maids to prepare bathing water. Nowadays, the small castle always had bathing water, because the servants knew that their master was an aristocrat who was extremely fond of cleanliness. It was normal for him to wash once a day, twice a day, or 3 times a day. But it was abnormal not to wash for a day. After taking a bath, he changed into a loose robe. This robe was a kind of pajamas. The aristocrats here also knew that it was uncomfortable to always wear tight formal clothes, so they changed the pajamas into home clothes. Liszt still felt that it was cumbersome and uncomfortable to wear. In the summer, he liked half-sleeved shirts and t-shirts the most, so he rolled up the sleeves of the robe, revealing half of his arms. Although this was not in line with aristocratic etiquette, in the small castle, who would dare to pursue his small transgression? The countryside also had its advantages. Master, unfortunately, we don't have ice. Otherwise I could brew you a cup of crystal sugar water to dispel the heat. Even in Tulip Castle, there is not much ice to squander in the summer. I can bear this difficulty, but unfortunately, I can no longer drink cold beer. He did not like to drink. Now he drank at banquets because his predecessor loved alcohol and needed to socialize. But he only liked to drink cold beer in the summer, which was cool and bright. Midsummer was approaching, and it was getting hotter day by day. In his memory, the hottest time on Coral Island was when eggs were cooked on the ground. It was estimated to be 40 degrees Celsius. Every year, many serfs would die of heat. I heard that saltpeter can be used to make ice. However, saltpeter is difficult to obtain. It seems that there are no saltpeter mines on the Coral Island, and even if there were, I wouldn't be able to recognize them. I remember reading that the earthen corners, stables, and toilet corners in the countryside are rich in saltpeter. However, the flower town only has wooden houses and no toilets. Basically, Liszt could not replicate the technology of making ice with saltpeter. Like the other nobles, he could only hide the ice in the icehouse during the winter and move it out during the summer. Mr. Carter, don't forget to remind me to build an icehouse this winter. Yes, master. Dinner. As usual, Gort, Marcus, Isaiah, and Blair were invited. In the flower town, only these 4 people were qualified to eat at the same table as Liszt. Liszt, the planning for the oyster settlement has been completed. Tomorrow, the first batch of oyster settlement fishermen will wear the new equipment you have prepared for them and head to the East Coast to officially fish. They are all old people, women, and children. They are stupid and impulsive. For the past 2 days, they have been picking shells on the seashore. When the news of the Lord personally hosting a seafood banquet spread, the commoners followed suit and prepared to go fishing for seafood to eat. They always followed the actions of the Lord. Liszt said solemnly, Teacher Gort, you must properly guide the safety. I don't want any commoners to be in danger because of eating seafood. As the town's officials, you must pay attention to this idea. The population is the most important productivity of the flower town. They might still be inwardly disapproving. However, Gort and the others, who already understood Liszt's attitude, still nodded without hesitation, expressing their understanding. Then tomorrow, if you have time, come with me to the oyster settlement to see the effect of the fishermen's first beachcombing. At the same time, you must actively publicize every kind of seafood that can and cannot be caught. In addition, you must also teach them how to preserve the seafood. Sir Baron, we have already organized the clerks to repeatedly emphasize this point. Moreover, the clerks have also tasted the seafood in the castle. They are very enthusiastic about this. Very good. The next day, after calculating the time of low tide, List arrived at the oyster settlement with the retainer knight. The oyster settlement had yet to start building houses. Just a piece of wasteland not far from the seashore had been leveled. In the future, wooden houses would be built. At this time, there were about 200 old, weak, women, and children carrying baskets or wooden buckets on the East Coast's flat beach, constantly rummaging through every rock and shoveling every piece of sand. Many of them still didn't have gloves, shovels, hammers, and other tools. They had to rely entirely on their hands. The output of the town's tailors and blacksmiths could not keep up. "Sir Lord." After seeing List, the fisherman saluted. List nodded slightly in response to the fisherman. Riding Fire Dragon, he strolled around. Beachcombing was very tiring, being exposed to the wind, the sun, and the blisters. However, the workload was not very heavy. Therefore, the fishermen, who had always felt like idling, were now very enthusiastic. Whether they had experience or not, they were very busy. After watching for a while, List felt unbearably hot. He hurriedly hid under the coconut tree. He raised his head and looked at the tall coconut tree, feeling that something was not quite right. After a long while, he understood. There are no coconuts. Thereupon, he turned around and asked the clerk beside him, "Does this tree not bear fruit?" "It bears fruit, Sir Lord. This is a fragrant coconut tree. Its fruits are called fragrant coconuts. However, when the fruits are very small, they are picked by the monkeys of the Thorns Ridge." Monkeys? They are a kind of grayish-yellow monkeys. We call them fruit-stealing monkeys. They are very fierce. Sometimes they will go to the farmlands in groups to destroy the crops. Fruit-stealing monkeys. List nodded, not saying anything. He suddenly recalled the news he had seen. It seemed that in some Southeast Asian countries, there was a tradition of training monkeys to pick coconuts. Coconut trees were very tall, making it very difficult for humans to climb them. However, monkeys could freely pick coconuts from the trees. If the town also trained a group of fruit-stealing monkeys, they might be able to develop a coconut business. Of course, he was still not sure whether this fragrant coconut tree was a real coconut tree or not. In winter, the flower town was covered in snow for more than 2 months. If it was a real coconut tree, it would have already frozen to death. How does the fragrant coconut taste? Once, I picked up a fragrant coconut that was dropped by a fruit-stealing monkey. It had a lot of milk-like juice inside. Tasted sweet and sour, very delicious. List's appetite was aroused. There were many such fragrant coconut trees on the East Coast. If they could be protected, he should be able to harvest a lot of fragrant coconuts. It could be regarded as a kind of beverage, and could even be developed into a specialty. He cast his gaze towards the Thorns Ridge in the distance. Sooner or later, I will take down the Thorns Ridge and eliminate all threats to the flower town. Chapter 49. If World of Warcraft could be trained, then a few monkeys could naturally be trained as well. For a knight who possessed chi, beasts were no different from kittens and puppies. However, there were currently only 5 people in the flower town who possessed chi: List, Marcus, Gort, Isaiah, and Blair. Each of them had their own duties, so it was impossible for them to become beast tamers. It seems that it is time to select a few strong youngsters from the town's commoners, teach them chi, and become my retainer knight. As long as he could afford to raise a retainer knight, List could even form an orders of chivalry. However, due to the castle's financial and material limitations, he could at most raise a dozen retainer knight and form a squad of knight. This was his plan. The greatest use of the knight squad was to clean up the Thorns Ridge's world of Warcraft. The Thorns Ridge would be incorporated into the flower town and become his territory. Once the oyster settlement's food supply stabilizes and the castle's tax revenue stabilizes, then immediately train the retainer knight. Carl Hammerstein's 4 retainer knights did not possess chi. Their potential was already wasted, and they were not worth nurturing. The new retainer knight had to be nurtured from youngsters to cultivate chi and become a true knight. He was enjoying the shade and thinking about the development plan. Gort, who was next to him, could not help but wipe his sweat with a handkerchief. He had to wear a neat, aristocratic three-piece suit every day, so he was extremely hot. List, the fishermen have finished their inspection and everything is going smoothly. Should we go back? List was also very hot. This weather was really not a good time to go out. He nodded. All right, let's go back. He was not a spoiled person, but if he could enjoy it, then why should he feel wronged? As a lord, he had the power to kill in his fief. There was no need to show off the qualities of being close to the people and dedicated. Bloodline and chi were the foundation of aristocracy. On the way back, List inspected the construction of the settlement's roads. There was a lot of sand, but transporting it was rather difficult. Commoners could only use buckets and basins to transport the sand, which was not very efficient. But no matter what, the road was taking shape. Just as he passed by the flower farm, a stench suddenly floated over from afar. It drilled into List's nose and almost made him vomit. The flaming dragon horse beneath him was also sneezing non-stop, looking like it couldn't take it anymore. Ah, it's too smelly. What's this smell? Who made that weird smell? Several retainer knight also covered their noses, wishing they could puke on the spot. Who's cleaning their toilet? List recalled the fragrant smell of dung he picked up in the countryside when he was a child. At this time, the smell was even stronger, but he quickly responded, "There are no toilets in the flower town, nor are there any septic tanks. The dung I picked up shouldn't have such a smell." He pinched his nose and said to the retainer knight, "Carl, the four of you go investigate where the smell is coming from." After a while, Carl returned with a blade of grass in his hand. "Sir, the reason has been found." He raised the blade of grass in his hand. "It's this blade of grass." A few children on the farm were messing around and pulled out a lot of this blade of grass from a wasteland. Who knew that this blade of grass would emit such a disgusting stench? While speaking, an even stronger stench drilled into List's nose. The source was the blade of grass in Carl's hand. List endured the stench, but his eyes were shining. "Is this blade of grass very large?" "Yes." "Good, very good. Carl, immediately notify Gort to protect this blade of grass. Do not allow anyone to approach it, let alone harm it." Although puzzled, the retainer knight still obeyed the order. After giving the order, List was in a great mood. The valet Thomas couldn't help but ask, "Master, why do you feel happy about such a smelly blade of grass?" "You don't understand. This blade of grass is very useful." He returned to the castle. While taking a cold bath, he checked the smoke serpentines, wanting to see if the mission had been updated. He originally believed that he would have to change all the fishermen's equipment before the mission could be considered completed. But now, the mission reward of a large blade of smoke grass had already been obtained, indicating that the mission had been completed. Sure enough, after the smoke came out, the serpentines updated. Mission completed. Reward: a large blade of smoke grass. After a short moment, the smoke serpentines had already changed into mission: the newly reclaimed corn field has already been sown. The corn worm is impatient to breathe fresh air. It is a brave little fellow. Please help the corn worm settle down its worm stalk. Reward: a forgotten secret chi skill. A forgotten secret chi skill? It's not a secret chi skill, but a secret skill. Does this mean that the reward is only a big move? List guessed. The secret skill contained the method to refine and use chi, as well as many kinds of chi moves. Secret chi skills were relatively more powerful moves. They were somewhat similar to the ultimate profoundness of secret chi skills and could be understood as big moves. However, because of the cryptic and hidden inheritance, as well as the great difficulty in learning them, it was very difficult for small aristocrats to pass down secret skills from generation to generation. The Tulip family didn't have secret skills passed down. The Red Crab Island Marquis family also didn't have any since their rise. Only an old Marquis family could possibly have a secret skill or two. But it was undeniable that the value of a secret skill was enormous. Ultimate profoundness was the strongest move of every secret chi skill, but it was limited to mid-grade and high-grade secret skills. The power of ultimate profoundness was naturally limited. Secret skills were different. The stronger the chi, the more powerful they would be. List was very satisfied. Not bad. Not bad. Although I don't like fighting and killing, having a secret skill can greatly increase my battle strength and reduce the possibility of encountering danger. I just don't know what kind of secret chi skill it will be. However, I'll know in a moment. So far, the smoke mission didn't have any super difficult content. It was basically the daily work that List was supposed to do. This time was the same. The cornfields had been reclaimed in order to settle down the corn worms. Whether there was a mission or not, List would do it. Soon after, he thought of another question. Will this mission be a chain mission of the Invisible Dragon series? 3 days later, the oyster settlement's fishermen could steadily gather seafood at the sea, harvesting a large amount of seafood every time. A portion of the seafood quickly entered the commoners' dining tables, replacing the fishermen's need for bread and minimizing the town's grain consumption. But there was no place to store more seafood. List, we have to think of a way. There is too much seafood on the East Coast. The fishermen can't finish the seafood they catch, and it could go bad at any time. Gort found List and began to worry. In this regard, List was quite speechless. Since it can't be finished, then we have to think of a way to turn the seafood into dried goods and preserve it. Now is not a good season to make dried goods. Summer and autumn are more suitable. Before the dried goods season, then we should stop fishing. The seafood won't disappear from the sea. Without a cold storage and a sufficient amount of salt to preserve it, dried goods were the best way to store it. Now that the weather was too hot, dried goods could easily go bad. Therefore, it was better to catch less seafood and catch as much as there was to eat. This way, there wouldn't be excessive fishing in the sea. After saying that, List's tone was a bit stern, expressing his dissatisfaction. Teacher Gort, I am the Lord and you are an official. I need you to govern the flower town for me instead of looking for the Lord whenever something happens. Understand? Chapter 50. The oyster settlement's wooden houses had yet to be built, but the fishermen's fishing was progressing smoothly. The construction of roads in the settlements and the town was not fast, but they were being laid every day. The dairy farm's low-yielding and low-nutritious two-leaf grass had been completely eradicated and replaced with high-yielding and high-nutritious alfalfa. The 10 cows were very fond of the new grass, and their milk production had increased by a lot. The alfalfa in the horse farm outside the castle had also begun to flourish. Only, there were no pregnant mares and black dragon had yet to enter the estrus period. The peanut settlement's peanuts were growing well. The peanuts near the peanut worm stalk were about to be harvested. It was estimated that 2 batches of peanuts a year would not be a problem. The flower farm's black tulip had already begun to bear fruit. It was a kind of small capsule, dried fruit, but it had yet to split open. Once it split open, there would be many flaky seeds, which could be propagated in large quantities. With the influence of the tulip worm's worm stalk, the black tulip had more than 30 fruits. It was estimated that it could propagate several mu of land in one go. Then, it would be handed over to the tulip castle's greater sprite Xiangxiang to continue propagating it. In less than half a year, it could be planted on a large scale. If it was an ordinary farming method, it might not be able to reach such a scale even after several years. This was the ability of sprites. However, sprites were a powerful aid, but they were also a kind of restriction. They restricted humans from cultivating plants and researching fertilizers. Even now, they still adopted the primitive slash-and-burn method. List was changing the flower town's agricultural method. Each settlement had begun to popularize the composting of manure, plant ash, and pond mud. The wheat settlement still continued to grow wheat. With the help of the wheat worm stalk, it was possible to increase the wheat yield by 20 to 30%. At the same time, the 3 stalks of corn grass were also taken care of by special people. However, the majority of the corn grass was cultivated by the barley settlement serfs, who gathered forage seeds on their behalf. The barley settlement had previously mainly grown barley and oats. The most recent cornfield was the wasteland reclaimed in the barley settlement. Coupled with the cultivation of corn grass, there was a serious shortage of serfs. The mushroom settlement and the tomato settlement were still at their original scale, without much change. The town had the biggest change. There was no more dirty manure, and no one dared to litter the streets. This was enforced by list. There were patrol teams patrolling every day, and anyone who dared to litter would face a severe whipping. The nobles punished commoners with all kinds of tortures, but List selectively preserved them. At first, List thought of using the police station's method of public security detention, but later he thought that only detention without corporal punishment was simply a happy life for the serfs. He didn't have to work, and he could eat and drink for free every day. Therefore, physical punishment was unavoidable. I have already divided 50 acres of wasteland to plant corn. This is the limit of the corn worm's influence. Right now, the barley settlement is no longer able to meet the needs of the planting, and it is also very difficult to transfer serfs from other settlements. The oyster settlement has already transferred a group of serfs, so for the time being, there are only 10 mu of corn fields. Gort explained to List. Today they were here to settle down the corn worms. The corn had already sprouted. A layer of lush green covered 10 acres of newly cultivated wasteland that had been fertilized. So be it. After the oats and barley are harvested, we'll switch to corn. Without sprite worms, barley and oats are not cost-effective. List nodded. Immediately after, he began to settle down the corn worm stalk. The corn worm's worm stalk was yellow corn, so its color was bright yellow. It was very beautiful and dazzling. Little guy, come and take a breath of fresh air. The corn worm was indeed a brave little guy. It crawled out of the jade box, opened its mouth and spat out the worm stalk, which was planted in the middle of the field. The worm stalk quickly faced the wind and grew into a stalk of yellow corn covered in grains. At this point, the new mission was completed. Of the 6 sprite worms, 5 were settled down, leaving only the thorn sprite worm. List was in a good mood. While riding on the horse, he began to concentrate. The smoke serpentines quickly twisted before his eyes. Mission completed. Reward Chi Secret Skill Magic Eyes. Immediately after, the content changed, and a new mission was issued. Mission. All of your companions have been properly settled down. Only the thorn sprite worm does not have a new home. As the Lord, you cannot waste the productivity of any sprite worm. Please settle down the thorn sprite worm's worm stalk. Reward. The invasion of the invisible dragon. As he skimmed through the contents of the new mission, his complacent mood quickly shattered. Were it not for the retainers and servants following him, he would have stomped his feet and cursed. Smoke mission, are you kidding me? The invasion of the invisible dragon can also be regarded as a reward? According to the information previously obtained, the invisible dragon might leave behind a priceless space ring. However, one had to be alive to obtain it. A dragon could easily destroy a town. List did not want to test whether he could send the invisible dragon away with 2 old cows and a bundle of smoke grass. In his opinion, the more capable one was, the better one would be. If he were the lord of the Coral Island, then even if he had to lose a town, he would still give the invisible dragon a try. However, there was only the flower town. If the dragon rolled around, then the town would probably be gone and he would become a destitute person, let alone a luxurious aristocratic life. In a split second, he even decided to give up on the thorn sprite worm and never complete the mission to trigger the invasion of the invisible dragon as a reward. However, after calming down, he was not willing. The smoke mission seemed to be just pushing the boat with the current, pushing things that should have existed to him. However, if he did not push the boat with the current, then who knew how much more difficult it would be for him to develop. Moreover, he already could not do without the quick benefits brought by the smoke mission. Every time he completed a mission, he would get a reward, which felt wonderful. After struggling all the way to the castle, he made up his mind. Let's do it. Isn't it just the invisible dragon? Prepare the smoke grass and the cows. At worst, if the flower town is destroyed, then I will go to Tulip Castle and shamelessly ask for a share of the family property. The Count wouldn't want to see his son starve to death. For the sake of the space ring, and even more for the smoke mission, Liszt threw caution to the wind. After making up his mind, the next step was to make adequate preparations. For this reason, he spent the night in the castle study, lighting a lamp and staying up late to design a plan. He did not let anyone participate. It was good that he alone held the secret of the invisible dragon. If he obtained the space ring, then there was the risk that the secret would be leaked and the divine artifact would be snatched away. The space ring was worthy of being called a divine artifact. Before considering victory, first consider defeat. The most important thing is to preserve one's life. This was the core idea of Liszt's design plan. Regardless of whether things would succeed or not, the first thing to do was to ensure his own safety without any worries. He looked at the sketch of the flower town he drew. After thinking for a long time, he circled the dairy farm. This will be the battlefield for the invasion of the invisible dragon. The cows will be left as bait. Then, all the smoke grass will be cut and piled on the dairy farm to attract the invisible dragon's attention. As for fighting, it is impossible. No one can defeat a dragon, let alone kill an invisible dragon. It is said that dragons have dragon breath. It sprays special magic substances such as flames, acids, venom, and the like from their mouths. Half of a dragon's fighting strength relies on dragon breath. Therefore, the surface is very dangerous. It is necessary to dig underground so that one can escape from the invisible dragon. A dragon would never dig the ground and catch a few insects like humans, right? Then, I probably cannot see the invisible dragon, and the flower town should also not be able to see the invisible dragon. In order to ensure the invisible dragon's true position, I should sprinkle a layer of flour on the dairy farm so that when the invisible dragon walks, it will leave its footprints. But then again, do dragons need to walk? Don't they fly? Liszt scratched his head, thinking about how to find the invisible dragon. However, no matter how he thought about it, he still could not figure out how to see a dragon that could become invisible. Irritated, he slammed his fist on the table. Clatter. Chapter 51. After a lot of effort, the flames were extinguished, but the night novel had already been burnt to a crisp. This was a night novel called Vulture Knight Stephanie's Expedition. Strictly speaking, it was more like an autobiographical history book. It was about a sky knight Stephanie Vulture who could soar in the sky riding a World of Warcraft dragon vulture. He opened up new territory for the Blast Furnace Kingdom. The story was very boring, but the content was very detailed. Among all the fabricated night novels, this one could be called a clear stream. Liszt had read it 3 times and felt that the story was most likely true. Even the Vulture family might still exist in the Blast Furnace Kingdom. What a pity! Such a good book. I wonder if I can get a new one when I go to Tulip Castle next time. Holding the burnt novel, Liszt felt regret. Good books were hard to find. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and saw the burnt cover peeling off, revealing a corner of the golden color. It seemed that the cover had a layer. With a flick of his finger, the cover cracked and fell off, revealing the golden color inside. It really is a layer. Liszt's disappointment was replaced by surprise. This should be the so-called forgotten Do-Chi secret skill. The wheat worm mission was completed during the day, and the mission reward was delivered at night. Everything was so natural. The cover was completely rubbed off, revealing a golden paper about the size of a palm. It was not real paper. After Liszt studied it, he found that it was made of gold, similar to tinfoil. On it, there were a lot of small characters and a diagram of the human body's chi circulation, which was engraved with a relief technique. Magic I Chi secret skill, Stephanie Vulture. At the top of the golden paper, a line of slightly larger serpentines was written. Sure enough, it's a Do-Chi secret skill, Magic Eye, the inherited secret skill of the Vulture family. It seems that this novel I obtained is extraordinary. It might very well be a unique one. The weight of this golden paper is equivalent to that of a gold coin. I don't think there's such a piece in every book. After saying that, he looked away from the golden paper and stared at the bookshelf in the study. These books contain information about the invisible dragon and magic eye. Is there something else hidden in them? In order to verify his idea, he used a knife to make a cut on the cover of each novel. But he did not find any layer. Obviously, there was only one chi secret skill. Magic eye, the content is very complicated, and the chi circulation involved is quite detailed and cumbersome. It is much more complicated than the ultimate chi secrets. It is a bit difficult to learn. Liszt felt that his understanding was not bad. He learned of fire dragon drill and fire surge quickly and was about to master them. He also planned to follow Marcus to learn his archery skills. He preferred long-range attacks of his own. Should I postpone learning this magic eye? As soon as he thought of this, he saw the introduction of magic eye at the end of the golden paper and directly rejected it. The introduction said, "The magic eye can directly see through the operation of magic. Even a great mage's invisibility cannot hide their figure under the magic eye." In a flash, he understood that this chi secret skill was still part of the chain mission, and it existed for the sake of the invisible dragon. Is this telling me that I can see the invisible dragon after learning the magic eyes? Therefore, what Liszt had to do next was already clear. He first repeatedly tested the smell of the smoke grass and found that the smell of the juice from the grass was quite pungent, but it was not as strong as the smell of the smoke grass when it was burned. He had people cut a batch of smoke grass to dry and built a beacon tower on the dairy farm, specifically preparing to burn the smoke grass to attract the invisible dragon. Under the beacon tower, he began to dig an underground passage for hiding. At the same time, cows would be tied around the beacon tower. Before the invisible dragon invaded, the cows would be smeared with smoke grass juice. On a slope a little further away from the beacon tower, Liszt also had people dig a tunnel. The entrance to the tunnel was camouflaged with a bunker. According to his plan, he would hide here and constantly supervise the invasion of the invisible dragon. After seeing the invisible dragon, he had his servants light the smoke grass on the beacon tower, and then the servants went into the underground passage to hide. He watched the invisible dragon eat and drink to its heart's content until it flew away. Then, he rummaged the ground to see if the invisible dragon would drop its gem. Standing on the slope where the tunnel was being dug, Liszt was still pondering in his mind, lest he missed anything. If the mission is really completed, then the reward will be issued. This means that after I set up the thorn sprite worm, the invisible dragon will come to the flower town. Is it the smoke mission that controls the invisible dragon? Or is it a coincidence that the mission guides it? I can try to set up the thorn sprite worm at any time, and the invisible dragon will also invade the flower town at any time? It was very mysterious. For the time being, there was no answer. What he had to do was to strive to complete every smoke mission and strengthen himself. Liszt, digging from here to the Thorns Forest is not a simple task. I still don't know why you are doing this. Gort directed the commoners to dig the tunnel according to Liszt's instructions. You don't need to know, Teacher Gort. It is not that I don't trust you, but rather, it is a secret of mine. You just need to move all the dairy farm's farmers to another place for a day on the day I notify you. All right, the flower town is your territory. No one can go against your will. Of course, I will do as you say. That's good. So, do you really want to set up the thorn sprite worm in the Thorns Forest? The forest is not large and is not a good location. I have my reasons. Oh, it doesn't matter. In any case, the thorn sprite worm is a useless sprite worm and will not affect the development of agriculture. Every sprite worm has a unique function. It is just that we have yet to discover it. Perhaps, one day, you will discover that the thorns will also give birth to magic ingredients. Haha, I hope so. The project went on like fire. No one understood why Liszt wanted to do this, but no one dared to resist. In the flower town, basically no one dared to stop Liszt from doing what he wanted, including murder and arson. The tunnel was dug one day at a time. He began to practice the magic eyes secret technique in the castle. This chi secret technique was very complicated, but with his comprehension, he quickly found the knack of it. To put it bluntly, It was to use the eyes as a bridge to allow his chi to resonate with the magic power of the outside world. Magic power was a quite magical force that emitted fluctuations all the time. He preferred to call these fluctuations the radiation emitted by magic power. Receiving radiation and using the eyes as a radar, this was the principle of the magic eyes, a non-combat secret technique. After studying for 5 days in a row, List finally completed the final chi operation technique and cast the magic eyes for the first time. At that moment, looking at his own eyes in the mirror, the sapphire blue pupils seemed to be rotating. Countless stars flowed in the rotating pupils, mysterious and profound, bewitching and beautiful. My eyes can charm any girl to death, right? He cast his gaze outside the window. Marcus was teaching chi to the 4 retainer knight retainer. They were already past their prime, but with diligent training it was still possible to extract chi. At this time, Marcus in his field of vision was like a cyan figure. Not far away, Dosen, who was competing with a stone, was a faint yellow figure. Chapter 52. The magic eyes consumed a lot of chi. List found that he could only maintain it for 5 minutes. Not only would his chi not be able to keep up, but his eyes would also become sore. However, whenever the chi in his body was exhausted, the red blood sword worn at his waist would send a warm aura to make up for the loss of chi. The ruby produced by the dragon contained magical power. When he condensed the magic eyes, he could see the ruby glowing with a blood-like light, like a whirlpool, slightly rotating. I can see the magic of the gem, so I should be able to see the magic of the dragon. During this time, I should practice hard and try to cast the magic eyes at will. Pulling out the red blood sword, List was in high spirits. Next, it was time to prepare for the dragon slaying. Gort, what do you think Sir Baron means? Why is he digging an underground passage here? Isaiah counted on his fingers, calculating how many copper coins to be distributed to the serfs. List never drove the serfs for free and always paid them a certain amount of money. Therefore, the serfs were eager to sign up for various kinds of production and construction. Driven by interests and the authority of the Lord, everything went smoothly. To be honest, I'm confused. Gort held the pipe in his mouth, looking as if it had nothing to do with him. List is already an adult. He is no longer the timid youngster from the Tulip Castle. Most of the time, I cannot understand what he is thinking. I don't know what he will do to Flower Town. That's not what you said in the letter. You said that Flower Town is thriving. If I didn't say that, would you have come? Besides, Flower Town is thriving now. At least we have seafood to eat every day, don't we? I admit that catching seafood is a pioneer, and picking up feces is also a major move. But what are we doing today? Digging an underground passage under the farm? Are we going to store the pasture in the cellar? Gort took off his pipe and shook off the ash. Don't complain. Blair never complains, so every dinner, List drinks an extra cup with him. That's because he's already old. He just wants to find a noble backer and spend his remaining years in peace. He doesn't have any ambition. You're not young anymore, but I hope that one day I can return to the ranks of nobles. I must fight for my son. He is too stupid and will never be able to marry a noble lady. Isaiah scratched his head in distress. I originally wanted to come here to see if I could get a chance to go to the battlefield. You said that List has great ambitions. I'm not sure, but you can talk to Marcus. That guy used to want to be a noble more than anyone else, but he quickly pledged his loyalty to List. Isaiah narrowed his eyes. I will. Soon it was evening and the distribution of wages began. Isaiah checked the roster and distributed copper coins to the serfs one by one. Next, Aliva Dog's hit. Sir, it's me, it's me. Alewa, whose surname was Dog Shit, rubbed his palms and happily received the 2 copper coins from the clerk. He could buy 8 large loaves of black bread. However, he didn't intend to buy black bread. His wife had already joined the oyster settlement and went out to sea every day to catch seafood. In addition to the portion handed over to the castle, they could also eat seafood at home. After eating a lot of seafood these days, he felt that his body was full of strength. At night, his endurance doubled, reaching more than 6 seconds. His wife praised him for his ability and told him to eat more seafood. He was going to have a third child. Now that he earned more copper coins, he could send his child to the blacksmith shop as an apprentice in the future. The Sir Lord had said that serfs with a skill would be put in an important position. Praise be to Sir Lord. After putting away the copper coins, Alewa couldn't help but pray in his heart. He liked his current lord because his days were getting better day by day. He didn't have to worry about not having enough to eat and could even save up copper coins. I just don't know. Why did Sir Lord dig a hole here? He was a serf of the dairy farm and was in charge of raising cows. Before, he was still worried and complained to his wife that he might lose his job. Sir Lord might not want to raise cows anymore. Otherwise, why would he dig a hole in the dairy farm? But his wife fiercely scolded him. If you don't raise cows, you can raise horses. If you don't raise horses, you can build roads. If you don't build roads, you can grow corn. Sir Lord is a great person, allowing the elderly, women, and children to work easily and eat their fill. Bullshit. Stop your complaints. You must believe in Sir Lord. Alewa was obedient to his wife, so he quickly changed his mind. He felt that no matter where Sir Lord dug a hole, he was still a great lord. As for why he dug a hole, it didn't matter. How could a commoner understand the thoughts of a noble lord? Practicing magic eyes and supervising the construction of the project became List's main work these days. After a few days, all the preparations for the dairy farm had been completed. The beacon tower was ready, the bunker was camouflaged, and the passage was repeatedly passed without any obstacles. The smoke grass was harvested and stacked on the beacon tower, ready to be lit at any time. The young cows were raised not far away, while the 2 old cows, Old Flower and Old Black, were tied to the edge of the beacon tower. List also walked the road from the Thorns Woods to the bunker several times to ensure that he could immediately rush to the bunker after placing the cordyceps. The bunker had a U-shaped passage that connected to another refuge. If the invisible dragon didn't eat the cows and grass as expected and fly away from the flower town, he would immediately hide in the refuge through the U-shaped passage and then block the passage. The refuge's breathing holes were connected to the outside world, and a lot of food and drink items were stored there. At the very least, his life could be guaranteed. When dealing with a dragon, he didn't dare to be careless. Walking through the dairy farm, List inspected the quality of the project for the last time. It wasn't a big project, so the progress was fast and the quality was good. Moreover, it was built according to his wishes without any perfunctory measures. I like this world, this era. He climbed the beacon tower and overlooked the entire dairy farm. Everyone has to be busy with a word from the Lord. Previously, when I was managing a 5-person team in the company, there were still thorns that opposed me. Here, no one dares to question my words, not even Gort or Marcus. For men, power was an irresistible desire. A person who had never enjoyed power might not feel that it was wonderful. But after enjoying power, it would become addictive and irresistible. List could no longer give up his identity as the Baron of the Flower Town. At the same time, the ambition at the bottom of his heart continued to grow. The Flower Town was still too small to satisfy his desire for greater power. Fortunately, ambition was just ambition. Reason dominated his thoughts. Based on the policy of accumulate grain widely, build high walls, and slowly claim kingship, he slowly planned. Chapter 53. In early June, the weather was dry. When the sun rose in the morning, the coolness was swept away and replaced by a heat that would last all day. Dressed in a black world of Warcraft leather armor with the jeweled red blood sword hanging at his waist, his sapphire eyes were in high spirits, and his handsome face had a solemn expression. Gort, who got up early and came to the castle to listen to orders, looked at the Lord of Flower Town in front of him and was momentarily absent-minded. Even the Earl of Coral Island did not have the soul-stirring aristocratic temperament of List at this time. In terms of appearance, out of 100 points, List could get 99 points. 1 point less was out of fear that he would become too arrogant. Being handsome could not be eaten, but it could make one happy. Every morning when he got up and looked in the mirror, Liszt would be in a good mood. The valet Thomas carefully helped Liszt tidy up the creases on his leather armor. The main duty of a valet was to maintain an aristocratic appearance. Teacher Gort, according to the original plan, moved the dairy farm's farmers to other settlements and implement a full day of lockdown. All fiefs residents are not allowed to leave their homes for any reason. The patrols are to suspend their patrols and wait in the administrative office for my order to lift the lockdown. Understood, Liszt, I will give the order. Gort turned around and rode out. Everyone in the fief was confused about the Lord's decision, but obedience was already deep in their bones. After the order was issued, the entire flower town quickly quieted down. It was as quiet as a deep sleep at night, with only a few barks occasionally heard. After all, there were not many people who could afford to keep dogs, so this little bit of noise was irrelevant. The sun was still climbing in the east. Liszt personally saddled Fiery Dragon to prevent it from making any noise. Mr. Carter, do you remember what I said? Master, you said to close the castle gate today. Dosen and the horses are to be locked up as much as possible so that they don't make any noise. If you encounter danger, take all the servants to hide in the cellar and don't go out. Only when Master returns can the castle return to normal. Very well, that's it. Carter's face was full of worry. Master, will you be in danger? A little, but I am fully prepared. Don't worry about me, Mr. Carter. On the side, Thomas hesitated. Master, you should take me. Although I don't have much ability, but in times of danger, I can buy Master some time. I am glad to hear that, Thomas, but there is no need. Liszt raised his whip and patted the horse. Fiery Dragon sprang out like a flame. The wind whistled in his ears and the horse's hooves kicked up a cloud of dust. On the roads of the small town, there was not a single pedestrian. Clearly, they had received orders to stay at home. Filled with excitement, he ran all the way to the dairy farm. Wearing a mask, Liszt climbed to the beacon tower and lit it himself. He originally intended to let the servants do the lighting, but in order to reduce the possibility of leakage, he decided to light it himself. Liszt 2J. On the beacon he lit. He said there was a day. Wait. Raising his hand to block the sunlight, Liszt looked around and no longer hesitated. He opened the jar and poured the juice onto the 2 old cows. A pungent smell suddenly spread out. The 2 cows twisted their bodies like crazy, trying to escape, but the rope was tied tightly, so they could only bear with it. Even with a mask, Liszt almost vomited because of the smell, but he still resisted the urge to vomit and quickly lit the smoke grass on the beacon tower, waiting for the flames to rise. He jumped down. He rode on the flaming dragon horse, which was also restless and wanted to escape, and went straight to the thorn forest. When he arrived at the thorn forest, he tied Flaming Dragon Horse and took a deep breath to suppress the urge to vomit. He looked around again to make sure that nothing was amiss. Then, he took out the jade box containing the thorn's worm. Man proposes, God disposes. Success or failure depends on this. Opening the box, he whispered to the chubby thorn's worm inside, "Little guy, come on, settle down." Their minds were connected. The thorn's worm climbed onto his hand, opened its mouth, and spat out the worm stalk. The worm stalk fell into the short bushes and quickly took root and germinated. At the same time, Liszt had already quickly hid in the tunnel and ran towards the bunker with his waist bent. When he entered the bunker, the thorn's worm stalk had already grown. He forced himself to calm down, concentrate, and summon the smoke mission. The smoke twisted for a moment and formed serpentines. Mission completed. Reward: Invasion of the Invisible Dragon. Seeing that the mission was completed, he did not wait for the new mission to be issued and immediately wiped away the smoke. Circulating chi, Liszt released magic eyes and looked at the sky. The thick smoke from the burning of the smoked grass rose into the air along with the breeze. In the bunker, he could smell the smell of stinky socks that had not been washed for half a year, which made him feel nauseous. Without binoculars, he could only rely on his own eyes. Under the beacon tower, the two old cows seemed to be suffocated by the smoke. They kept foaming at the mouth, which made List worried that they would be smothered to death before the invisible dragon appeared. Time ticked by. Seeing that the magic eye's time limit was almost up, yet there was still no trace of the invisible dragon. It stands to reason that the reward should appear at the same time after the mission is completed. It is just a matter of time before it reaches me. Why hasn't the invisible dragon invaded the flower town yet? Could it be that the reward is delayed? If the information about the invisible dragon is true, then it should have been attracted by the smoke grass as soon as it appeared. List's eyes were getting more and more tired, just as he felt that he could not hold on any longer and was about to disperse the secret skill. All of a sudden, a faint shadow caught List's attention in the sunny sky next to the smoke column of the smoke grass. The phantom was small and faint at first. Then, it began to enlarge and eventually formed a faint gray-white dragon shape. It had a pair of huge wings and a streamlined body. It circled around the smoke column and descended. List's heart shook fiercely. The invisible dragon! It really is the invisible dragon. Clenching the red blood sword, List worked hard to operate the little remaining chi in his body and continue to support the magic eyes to observe the invisible dragon. This was the first time he had seen a dragon that represented the world's apex power. Although he could only see the magic power on the dragon's body and not the dragon itself, he was still excited. As stated in the Earth Ranger Griff's Travels, the invisible dragon is not big. Compared to the thatched hut, it is only the size of a house. Including its wings, it is only 2 or 3 houses. However, its arrogant posture exuded an insufferably arrogant majesty. Even though he was quite far away, List could still feel his body tense up in response to the majesty of the dragon. This was dragon might. According to legend, wherever a dragon passed, all life forms would be awed and subdued. It followed the smoke of the smoke grass down. List's magic eyes had already collapsed and his body could no longer support the chi's secret skill. The invisible dragon's figure disappeared without a trace. But there was no doubt that the information provided by the smoke task was correct. The invisible dragon liked the smell of the smoke grass. Rubbing his sore and swollen eyes, List looked in the direction of the beacon with his naked eyes. He could not see the invisible dragon, but the movements over there showed that the invisible dragon was tossing and turning. The smoke was scattered everywhere, and the old cow was crawling on the ground, whining. In a flash, even the beacon began to collapse, and flames raged. Wuxia! You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.